2024 was a little bit of a slow year for gaming, at least that's what a lot of people say, especially with 2023 being so hectic. We had so many amazing games: Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Mario Wonder, Baldur's Gate 3, and Alan Wake 2, just to name a few. But for me, 2024 was the most busy I have ever been in terms of playing video games. I've seen so many videos of people talking about their backlog. It's almost a little cliche at this point, like, who really cares? We all have tons of games that we never really get around to. Not completing your Steam library has been a meme for well over a decade at this point, and I myself have made 2 videos now related to my own backlog. But for me, I think it's a little bit more personal. Late last year, I had an extreme case of imposter syndrome. My whole life, I've loved video games, and they have been my main focus and hobby for as long as I can remember. But when I think back on the list of games I've actually completed, as well as looking at my ever-growing backlog, I started to question my loyalty to this hobby. How can I say I love video games as an art form, yet I haven't even played many of the iconic series that laid the groundwork for the current gaming landscape? So at the beginning of the year, I made it my goal to play and work through as much of my backlog as I could, as well as play many of the iconic series that I remember playing as a kid. As I'm writing this, I'm actually not even done yet, but we have a lot to cover, and so many games to talk about. Some I won't have anything new to say, and some I could make entire videos about. I also won't be talking about or showing any major spoilers, but if you want to go into any of these games completely blind, I recommend just skipping over to the next game or saving this video for later. I'm hoping I can convince one of you to at least play one of the games I recommend here. But we have so many games to talk about, and there's no better way than to start with something truly meaningful. The original Half-Life has been on my backlog for as long as I can remember, honestly. I played Half-Life 2 for the first time in 2020, which it easily became one of my favorite games of all time, and therefore it sort of feels like an obligation. Well, I have to go back and play the original. Now, I have to clarify, I am not immune to jank. I think that era of games is really hard for me to go back to. I think I've become spoiled by a lot of the modern amenities that games nowadays come with. You know, I love Sonic Adventure, but I can barely pull myself through to play a PS1 or N64 game. It is a shortcoming and blind spot for me, and getting over that was really hard, and I didn't get over it, which is why I actually played Black Mesa. Now, Black Mesa is a fan remake of the original Half-Life, and I do think it does the game a little bit of a disservice by solely comparing it to Half-Life. I don't believe that it completely replaces the original game, but I think that if you already know the lore, if you're very familiar with the series like I am, I think this serves as a great alternative if maybe the original game, just for one reason or another, isn't for you. I think the 2 sections that really stood out to me were Chapter 8, I believe it was, with, the Rails section and the Zen area. I think the Rails section was initially where I put the game down, as, the train wouldn't move, or it was really complicated, things just didn't feel right to me. It's really drawn out. And I think in Black Mesa, it is much more streamlined and feels a lot more intuitive. And I think that this is where Black Mesa shines, because it takes things that maybe didn't age well in the original game, which is still phenomenal, but I think makes it a lot more approachable. Zen is maybe one of the prettiest Source games I've ever seen. I think just as I was getting sick of the Black Mesa facility, heading into Zen was amazing. The Vortigaunt villages reminded me a lot of Doom Eternal, and overall, I had an amazing time. I actually tried to play through Black Mesa a couple years back and just couldn't get into it, so I'm really glad that now I was able to sit down and really complete this game. And that leads us right into the next one, Half-Life 2. Now, I just said that I beat this game for the first time in 2020, but I was a little bit Half-Life pilled. Before Black Mesa, I had actually completed both Portal 1 and 2, so I was definitely in a Half-Life mood. When I played Half-Life 2 originally, it really became cemented as one of my favorite games of all time, if not one of the greatest games of all time. And I can gladly say that nothing changed. I think even little things like the physics puzzles still really impress me, even on, my 5th playthrough. I think the graphics have aged phenomenally for, when looking at games from that era. I think they still look sharp. I think the characters are well acted and the facial animations are really well done. You know, going back through this year, I've been playing a lot of old games and looking at other games from 2004 and around that era. No games really did it as well as Half-Life 2 did. It gave me a new perspective to really sit down and play this game and try to appreciate the little things like that. The music is obviously still amazing. CP Violation is something that still gives me chills when I listen to it to this day, and hearing it fade in the beginning of the game as you start to fight Combine is still so amazing. And moving on to the Combine, I think they might be one of, if not my favorite villains, I don't know if you call them villains, but enemies in video games. Hearing their radio chatter that reminds you that these are still people who have lost essentially all of their humanity is so cool to me. We'll get into it a little bit later, but I think seeing how the world has become since Black Mesa really made me want to explore and, save this world. This is a game that I will probably be replaying until the day I die. It truly is amazing, and yeah, I think it definitely deserved a game of the decade.
Evacuate City 17 at once, if not sooner. I cannot state this without enough undue emphasis.
Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and 2 are something I'm a little mixed on. Not that they're bad, I just don't know if I'm in love with the episodic format, but, combined they essentially make a Half-Life 2 Part 2.
What the hell is that? A Combine zombie. That's like a zombine, right? Zombine, get it? Okay.
I think I really liked the slight quality of life changes that you see in this game. The environments are slightly more detailed, the lighting and graphics are just a smidge better, and they sort of give me a peek into what maybe a modern Half-Life game would look like. Obviously, we got Half-Life Alyx, but it's a VR game, it's sort of hard to play, I've never really played it. Going through Black Mesa, Half-Life 2, and then Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and 2 allowed me to see the evolution of this series, and I am definitely Valve-pilled right now. I don't have much to say about Half-Life Episode 1 and 2. I'm sort of combining these two as they're, as one game, but the cliffhanger I think still hits to this day, and hopefully one day we will see a conclusion to the story. After Half-Life, I think I was ready for a change of pace. One thing I did to really work through this year and not get fatigued was to switch it up. At one moment, I'll be playing a serious game, and then I'll be playing a more goofy game. One moment, I'll be playing a first-person shooter, and next, a platformer, and then an RPG, and then maybe back to first-person shooters. That really helps me not get fatigued. So after playing Half-Life, which was essentially 4 games, I was a little fatigued of the first-person shooters, so I sat down and played a Jet Set Radio Future. Last year, I beat Jet Set Radio and Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. Those 2 games are cemented as some of my favorite games of all time. So naturally, I really wanted to play Jet Set Radio Future, and if you've ever tried to, you will notice there is a little bit of a barrier of entry. This game has never been re-released, and it would immensely benefit from one, as Xbox emulation is not the best, and I had a lot of bugs when trying to emulate this. A friend of mine also had issues such as audio clipping, which once you notice it is really hard to ignore. I didn't notice it until about halfway through my playthrough, but even then it was grating. So much so that I just bought an original Xbox and played through the game on there. But even then, I had to spend upwards of $100 to get myself on a good quality original Xbox and, a working controller and the game itself. It really is a hassle, and I think highlights if you go back and watch the last video I did on preservation. Now, I know that a lot of that is tied up in music rights and, a lot of this whole stuff that Sega loves to do with not paying music artists, but man, this would so benefit, more so than the original when it comes to a re-release, because I think this game has aged really well. I almost like how this game controls more than Bomb Rush. I think it still has that weightiness while not feeling as jank as the original game. I loved the atmosphere. It almost feels like there is this smog or haze in a lot of the locations. It is very early 2000s. I love the trail that follows you when you are doing tricks, skating, or jumping. It's something I wish was in Bomb Rush. Bomb Rush is an amazing game, and I'm sure it's a lot of people's favorites, but for me, there were some things, just little things that I think were missing that Future just nails. We do have the upcoming Jet Set Radio games, which you don't really know too much about. I'm really excited. I'm skeptical, but I hope we can sort of see a revival of this franchise. Hopefully leading up to that, maybe we can get a re-release of Jet Set Radio Future. They also just delisted for some reason the original Jet Set Radio that was on Xbox backwards compatibility. Really weird. I would imagine hopefully that's because they are going to re-release it, but I guess we can only hope. I don't know exactly what's going on, but this franchise is near and dear to my heart, and if you can somehow get your hands on a copy of Jet Set Radio Future, whether it's legally or frankly illegally, because they don't even sell it to begin with, it's a great game. Demonstrating how I like to switch it up, we're now going to completely flip the tables. BioShock is a series that I've wanted to get into for a very long time. I've heard so much about this series, as I think it is a staple from the 7th generation. The BioShock that has been the subject of plenty of video essays, and is almost like the Metal Gear Rising of the BioShock series, if you know what I'm talking about, is BioShock Infinite. This game has eluded me for a long time. I've started it and I've put it down about 1 million times, but I was really set on actually getting through it. And to my surprise, it's actually pretty short, which I'm someone who likes a short game. I like to sit down and reach the credits relatively quickly before I get fatigued. I like a nice compact story, but this game sort of surprised me with how quick it was. I think I beat it in around 6 hours, but I don't think that detracted from the experience. I didn't play the DLC, and there is a sort of open-ended ending, so I think multiple playthroughs are definitely valid in this case, and I think that the game has aged very well. The gunplay, while not amazing, still feels really great. I think the abilities are really creative. While probably my least favorite in the trilogy, I think they still allow for a great playground whenever it comes to, like I said, replaying the game. I think it gives you a lot of options to try out new stuff. I also think out of the trilogy, graphically, this game has aged phenomenally. I played this game on PC at max settings, and it still looks kind of amazing. I think the only thing that really aged is the facial animations, but other than that, it still looks amazing. I think the main sticking point for a lot of people is the aesthetic, the sort of steampunk, up in the clouds vibes. It's really cool. I think that is maybe the only takeaway some people have, which can detract from the experience, but I still think that it truly is a great game. There is some talk about this game, you know, whether or not it's hyped up too much or it being super overrated. I don't really know about any of that. I just had a good time, and we're going to talk about BioShock later. Spoiler alert. But I think after playing the BioShock games later, I can definitely see some complaints where the abilities didn't feel as good as the original BioShock, and I think that there also is a little bit of less replayability. So I can see some complaints in that section, but overall, a good game, and you don't have to play any other BioShock games to know what's going on here, so it's worth a shot. A game I missed out on in 2023 was Hi-Fi Rush. Side note, I'm currently editing this video and realized I have zero footage of this game, and I put it through Game Pass and I refuse to renew my subscription, so all the footage you're going to see here is just pulled from trailers that have been uploaded to YouTube. I'm really sad I missed out on this game, and I think a lot of people missed out on this game, as we saw with the studio getting shut down. Now, they did later get rebought, but that doesn't take away the fact that Microsoft didn't see this game as enough of a success as to keep it around, and if they didn't get bought out, I mean, that would have been the end of this franchise, which sucks because this is one of the best, you know, it's not Xbox exclusive anymore, but this is one of the best Xbox exclusives in, I mean, maybe a decade. I really am struggling to think of any game that is as polished and is just, you know, as good of a time as this game is. I kind of loved it. I really want to go back and replay it to get more comfortable with the combat and settle myself in more with the characters, as I only really did one playthrough. But I think while corny, a lot of the dialogue and characters are really charming. I think graphically, a lot of it looks like 2D stills. There is 2D animation in the game, but I think it you know, funnily enough, looks worse than a lot of the 3D animation. I almost wish that the whole game just looked like that. Some moments look picturesque as if it is just, you know, a frame from an animation. I'm so glad the studio is going to be given the opportunity to make a sequel, and I hope it is infinitely more successful than it was under Microsoft, because I think Microsoft completely fumbled this game. If you can somehow play this game without giving Microsoft money, please do. I think it truly is amazing, and I'm so excited to see what Tango does next because, wow, I had a really great time. I think my only real complaint is, for a game that is so centered around music, there is really nothing that grabbed me. It sort of all just sounded like very generic guitar riffs. And I know there is a setting in the game that makes it so all the music is copyright free. This is for streamers and YouTubers who want to upload their gameplay and don't want to get copyright striked, because they do have songs from real bands in the game. And I had to check multiple times to make sure I didn't have this setting on, and I never did. I just don't think the music really hit for me, which is really sad because, you know, it's a game, as you know, where music is the main theme. You have to attack on the beats to get the most damage. So not having any music that really vibed with me kind of sucked, but I don't think it was anything bad. Like, I wasn't, you know, muting it or anything like that. That kind of would have ruined the whole game. But I was a little sad that a game that was so centered around music didn't really have anything that I was vibing with. But still an amazing game, and I definitely recommend you should check it out. So after all this, I actually wasn't done with Valve. I have never played Left 4 Dead. I have played so much Left 4 Dead 2. Dating back to the Xbox 360, I have played that game more times than I can count. But I think, funnily enough, I had never really sat down and played through the original. I've booted up here and there, and I know the gist of it, as all the levels are in Left 4 Dead 2. I can't say I was really missing anything. Unless you want to sit down and just experience the history, there is really nothing here. I think the only thing that I really took away from this that I liked was the vibe. I think a lot of the levels are much more gritty and gray. I like that so much of them actually used the flashlight. It felt more like a horror game, and I actually really liked that. I don't know if any of it was better than what we see in Left 4 Dead 2, as I believe it is almost the perfect sequel. I think it is still kind of cool to go back and look and sort of see where the series came from, because I think Left 4 Dead pretty much does everything the first game does, but a million times better. But again, it's hard to recommend it, because why would you go and play this when all the original game's levels and weapons are in Left 4 Dead 2, which is just a much better game in general. Also, it's like super short. I mean, if you have a friend, you can just sit down and you could bust through this in like a couple hours, and it's often on sale for like $1 or $2. So whatever, you know, go play Left 4 Dead 2. That's all I really have to say. Sort of like Hi-Fi Rush, one of the games I was actually really anticipating but missed in 2023 was the Resident Evil 4 remake. I've always wanted to get into Resident Evil, especially Resident Evil 4, as it is sort of hyped up as like this genre-defining game. And I also really love Devil May Cry, and if you know the history behind these games, you will know what I'm talking about. So I was very drawn to Resident Evil 4. So when I saw they were doing a remake, I was really hooked, because the Resident Evil 2 remake, while I didn't complete it, I played a good chunk of it and I really liked it. But I'm just not a survival horror guy, and Resident Evil 4 really drawed me in because I know it's more of an action game. And when I sat down and played this game, I am so sad that I hadn't played it sooner. This is such an amazing remake, and it highlights, I think, how important these remakes are. I think it makes the games and series so much more accessible to a new audience. If this remake had never come out, I still would not be into Resident Evil. And because of this, I went back and I checked out Resident Evil 2 Remake again. I even bought Resident Evil 6 and Resident Evil 5 and was looking into like Revelations and stuff. And it really ignited that Resident Evil flair inside of me that was waiting to be sparked. I played this game just kicking my way and shooting my way through everything, and I had an amazing time. I didn't get jump scared or even feel a little bit scared pretty much at all through my whole playthrough. I had a friend that played it alongside me, and he said he got scared a couple times, but I essentially treated this game like an action game, just bulldozing my way through everything, and I really liked it. I've played through a little bit of the DLC, but something about Ada's voice actor just really puts me off. I believe this was recorded probably during COVID, so maybe they were, you know, using at-home setups to record the audio, but it sort of always sounds like she's in another room and using a worse microphone than everyone else, and it, I mean, genuinely takes me out of the experience every single time.
Try using knives next time. Better for close encounters.
Not a bad move. Very smooth.
So who are you working for this time?
Oh, Leon. You know I don't work in town.
I know there was a lot of talk about this when the game came out, but like I said, I sort of missed out on it and I wasn't around for it, but geez, I don't even think it's that she's a bad voice actor. It just sounds like it's not produced well, and I don't really know what happened there. Now, I'm not super familiar with the lore of Resident Evil, but I think putting all that aside, you can just sit down and have an amazing, about 15 hours I think the game is, and it's super replayable as well. I started a second playthrough. I haven't completely gone through this game again, but I can see this game on harder difficulties being a real challenge and really fun, and I'm definitely at some point going to go back and play this. I also want to give a shout out to the RE engine. In a world of Unreal Engine 5 where nothing runs well, the RE engine holds up phenomenally. I have about a slightly above a mid-range PC. I can play pretty much most modern games at high settings, but a lot of Unreal Engine 5 games, which are most games nowadays, really struggle and hitch very frequently. But this game ran buttery smooth at max settings, and it felt amazing to play on mouse and keyboard. If you have a decent computer, please play this game on mouse and keyboard. It really does cement the sort of super soldier vibe that Leon gives off. Just being able to easily headshot, any enemy feels amazing. I'm done gawking about this game. It is a really great time. You should definitely play it. I think the beginning of this list was mostly filled with me really digging deep into games that I've been meaning to play for a long time. And a game that is almost at the bottom of that list is Shovel Knight. I had actually played through Spectre Knight when it came out, and I loved it. I had then tried to play through Shovel Knight, and for some reason it just didn't stick. Why that is, I don't really know. I think at the time I was like 15 and I just don't think I was really in the mood for it, but really sitting down and playing this game now, I cannot believe that I didn't get into this game. I mean, I couldn't tell you a negative. I think any negative that I could sit here and try and dig up from my memories of playing this game would be nitpicking to an extreme level. This game just does everything it's trying to do amazing. The music, unironically, might be one of my favorite soundtracks in video games. The graphics are so charming, and I love the level design and how it uses each ability to make what is essentially a buffed up NES game. I love platformers. I think that is something I should state, so that's why I'm glazing this so hard. Platformers might be my favorite genre of video games, and this is like the prime example. Hey, if you're an indie dev and you want to make a good 2D platformer and you haven't played Shovel Knight, I don't know what you're doing. I'm so excited to see what Yacht Club does next. I believe Mina the Follower, if that's what it's called, is coming out next, and while it's not the same at all from Shovel Knight, I think playing through Shovel Knight, playing through Spectre Knight, and eventually Shovel Knight DX, which is coming out soon, which I'm definitely going to get and replay, all the games. Yacht Club has cemented themselves as one of my favorites, and I almost feel obligated to check out whatever they have next. I, at this point, wasn't really feeling like diving into a larger experience, right? I just played Shovel Knight and Resident Evil 4, which are all relatively short games, and that is my wheelhouse. Anything around 20 hours or less is really what I enjoy. And this next one is a really short one, and I think that's what makes it amazing.
You know why? 'Cause we're so
We Love Katamari is one of my favorite games of all time. I played Katamari Damacy for the first time in 2023, and that also cemented itself as one of my favorite games of all time. I think there are few games that match the vibe of this game. The music is phenomenal, the graphics are so charming, and I think the gameplay is so simple but really addicting. I know a lot of that can be said about almost any game under the sun, but I think this game does all of those things better than almost any game on the market. There's a reason why, after not having a new game since I believe the Xbox 360, it still holds a place in so many people's hearts. This is a game that I can sit down and play for 30 minutes to even a couple hours, and guaranteed I will have a good time. And I think there are a few games like that, especially on this list. I feel like a lot of games I have to immerse myself in the story, I have to learn a bunch of complicated mechanics, but this game you don't have to do that. I think a lot of people get turned off by the controls, but I think after about 15 to 20 minutes, I think you're rolling. The standout for a lot of people is the music. I think the first game has one of the best soundtracks in all of gaming, and I think this one adds a little bit more variety and stuck with me maybe even more. There is slightly more of a story here. You get to meet a couple more characters, but a story in a game like this isn't really there. There isn't a whole lot of substance, and I think that's a good thing. I think that this game, like I said in the very beginning, is pure vibes. And if that's what you're looking for, please play this game. I recommend this to almost everybody because yes, it is weird at a first glance and it feels weird to control, but once you really just relax and get rolling, there are a few games that match this. And that's really all I have to say. So if you're looking for a fun, short game, please check this one out. I had games that I knew I wanted to play, and the Halo games are all on that list. I decided, well, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to beat the entire main trilogy. Halo really does hold a special place in my heart. Few games have such a perfect track record as Halo does, which I know sounds weird if you're only familiar with recent history, but I think you have to put yourself in the mind of an early 2000s gamer. Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo Reach, Halo ODST, and even Halo 4 are all amazing. Now, I'm only talking about Halo 1 through 3 here, and I think this might be my favorite trilogy in all of gaming, and that's a high bar. We're going to talk about some other trilogies later on that I played through, and a few games hit the highs of this. Starting off with Halo Combat Evolved. I played all these games through the Master Chief Collection, and I think that is the best way to play them. Master Chief Collection may have had a rough start, but it has cemented itself as one of the best packages in all of gaming. You can almost all the time find it for about 10 bucks, and you are going to struggle to find a better package. Halo CE is really simple. I think a lot of people get frustrated with the fact that you start the game off and half the game is you going one way and then the other half is going right back through it. But I think that as you get comfortable with the weapons, as you cement yourself in the world, especially playing this as someone, for the first time, I didn't really have an issue with that. The story is much more simple and you're basically just dipping your toes in, you're getting your feet wet, you're getting introduced to the villains, the characters. Master Chief is much more quiet and simple than he is in the later games. This game holds up as one of the best games from that generation. Looking at early first-person shooters, even ones that came out after Halo, it's a little rough to go back to. But playing Halo CE, graphics aside, it feels like a modern game. It genuinely feels really great. I think that the AI for the enemies is still really sophisticated. All the weapons are satisfying. I think Combat Evolved has my favorite shotgun in the entire series. I seriously cannot get enough of just running up to an elite and one-shotting them with a shotgun. The pistol is overpowered, but it's so fun. I mean, I played this game on controller, but playing it on mouse and keyboard and just very easily picking off grunts with the pistol is so satisfying. I kind of liked Cortana in this game. I have mixed feelings about how Cortana progresses after Halo 3, but I think Halo 1's Cortana is very basic, and she almost seems angry all the time and very frustrated with you. But I kind of like that. This is where the Master Chief and Cortana's relationship starts. Playing this game and then going through the whole trilogy is amazing. And I think that starting off with this very surface level relationship is actually great. Master Chief is also very basic, and I also am not sure how I feel after 3 and how they progress the character, but I like him in this game. He's basic, but he gets the job done. It's not a complete silent protagonist, but he only talks when he needs to. The voice actor does an amazing job. You are a weapon, a theme that will be pretty heavily explored later on in the series, but at this game, you don't need to worry about that. You're there to get a job done, and you do. And I think it still is very satisfying. Playing through the Halo series, I got a little sidetracked because while I was playing through Halo CE, I was watching a Nintendo Direct, and Penny's Big Breakaway got randomly shadow dropped. This was not on my radar, this was not something I was meaning to play anytime soon, but this coming from the Sonic Mania developers, one of my favorite games of all time, if not my favorite game of all time, this was a game I was looking forward to and was definitely going to play. So seeing that they just shadow dropped it randomly, well, that's what I jumped into. So we'll get back to Halo in a second. I was very surprised with this game. I went into it thinking, well, I'm probably going to get a Sonic-like experience coming from the people that had just made the best Sonic game ever made. But I left it with an experience that was more similar to Mario Odyssey. Imagine Mario Odyssey, but with a spin dash. Now you have to take into account this is a small team, so maybe things like the cutscenes and story aren't super in-depth, but Where it counts, they nail it. The gameplay and the vibes are so amazing. This is a game I could easily come back to. It, like I said, is very similar to Mario Odyssey, where I haven't played that game in years, but if I load it up right now, I could do all the same movement that I could when I initially played the game. The controls are just intuitive and they make sense. Learning how to swing with the yo-yo, learning how the momentum works when you're, I don't know what you call it, their version of spin dashing, and exploring each level and doing little challenges and finding little secrets is so satisfying. I think the only other takeaway I really had from it was the vibe. I loved the colors. I think initially seeing the trailer, I was a little skeptical. I didn't know how I felt about it, but I really liked the purples and the oranges. Playing this game on Switch with a lower resolution and lower frame rate, actually I think kind of added to the experience. It made it feel like a Saturn game, and I think that might have been what they were going for. I do want to play this game on PC or PS5, you know, something with a smoother frame rate, because obviously that would be better. But playing it on Switch was a great experience. I know they later patched it with a, in quotation marks, 60 FPS mode, but it for the most part is around 30 and 40 FPS. Please check this game out if you can get it on sale, and even if you don't want to get it on sale and want to drop 30 bucks, these developers are truly amazing, and I hope that this game was successful enough so that we can see what they're going to do next, because there are a few developers that I think just understand how to make a fun game. And these guys, man, they nail it. Hey, real quick, I'm editing this and realized that I never mentioned the music, which was weirdly one of my big takeaways from this. Similar to Sonic Mania, they really nail it. T. Lopes and Sean Bialo, I think that's how you say his last name, did such an amazing job. Christian Whitehead himself actually, I believe, composed some of the tracks here, or at least worked with T. Lopes, and it's so great. I want to play a couple here just to show you some snippets, because some of these were actually added to my Spotify, so which I know is a little cringe, but man, some of these are so good. Getting back to Halo. Halo 2, I was really interested in, because I've actually never sat down to fully complete Halo 2. I know it's going to sound really weird as a really big Halo fan, but I don't know. I've played the beginning a bunch, but I just never really got to the credits. And I'm really glad I did. I think I was feeling a little fatigued, and I know this is controversial, this might be my least favorite out of the trilogy, but that doesn't take away from the amazing story and the very interesting levels. I really do not think there is a game from before Halo 2 or that era that has a story that has aged as well as this, especially on the Master Chief Collection with the updated cinematics. I mean, I know it's been said to death, but holy shit, man. I almost wish this was a movie or a series. It is so good. I played most of the game on the original graphics, as that's just how I kind of like to do things. But even then, similar with Combat Evolved, it's really hard to state how modern this game feels. Dual-wielding SMGs still feels amazing. I think it might feel the best here out of any of the Halo games. I was a little disappointed with the shotgun. Combat Evolved has my favorite shotgun, and I think it got a little bit of a downgrade here. Same thing with the pistol. But I think riding into the big alien mech things, I don't know their names off the top of my head, is still such a cool spectacle to me, and it's so crazy that they pulled this off on the original Xbox. Now, you don't just play this game as Master Chief, you also play as the Arbiter, a character which I wasn't sure if I was gonna really like, but I became so attached to this character, and I think that once we get to Halo 3, you're gonna hear a lot more praise. The relationship between Chief and Arbiter is truly amazing, and I think there are few stories that tell this kind of dynamic well. You're so used to the elites being the enemy, and this isn't really spoilers, but I mean, everyone knows this story, but if you really don't want to hear spoilers, I guess move on just a little bit. But playing through the Arbiter and seeing how, you guys make amends, which yes is more so in Halo 3, but you see the beginnings of it here, is awesome. And I really hate how Halo 4 and after that sort of just retcons all of that. And is almost just like, well, no, they're actually the bad guys again. Because I think that playing through this trilogy in all one sitting really makes you appreciate the growth of all the characters and the relationships. That's all I really have to say about Halo 2. One of the best first-person shooters ever, and I was glad I was finally able to sit down and complete it. After Halo 2, I was a little fatigued, and I was a little afraid that that would ruin my experience, but Halo 3 has aged so perfectly. There is little I can say that hasn't already been said about Halo 3. I think it expands upon what makes Halo 2 so good. The Arbiter and Master Chief's relationship is phenomenal, and we see a conclusion to pretty much everything that the series has brought to us up to this point. Which I think is why, when delving into games like Halo 4 and other games later on in the series, it almost makes me wish that this is where the game ended. In my own head, I have to be honest, this is where the series kind of ends for me. I think that this is truly a perfect trilogy, maybe the best in gaming. And I don't say that lightly, as we actually will be talking about more trilogies later on. Visually, I think it has aged phenomenally. Just the opening forest area is still so beautiful. All the weapons still feel great. I'm actually surprised how the weapons throughout the entire series, despite being on multiple platforms, all feel almost the same. And that's a good thing because it feels awesome. The shotgun still isn't as good as Halo CE, and by this point I am definitely becoming familiar with how to interact with this game. A lot of the level tropes and how the NPCs interact with you sort of all becomes very formulaic up to this point. But I think that's more so a result of me just, playing through this whole series in the span of a couple days. Now, I try not to talk about spoilers here because I want you guys to sit down and play through pretty much any game here that I recommend. But I'm going to talk about one spoiler because talking about Halo 3 without delving into, I think, specifics is really hard. So if you don't want any spoilers, yes, the series is great. If you haven't played Halo for some reason, please go play and you can skip to the next game. That being said, when talking about Halo 3, few series leave off on a note that Halo 3 does. Like I said, the story is over. The aliens that you've been fighting the whole series up to this point are now on your side. You see a funeral, you see a peaceful send-off, and the game ends with you floating through space with Cortana in a scene that is still, to this day, so beautiful. I really don't think any game has made me feel like this did when I originally played it, and playing it now, 15 years or however long it's been since this game came out. I love Halo, and it's so sad to see the series be squandered by Xbox and Microsoft. I think there's a reason why, after not getting a good game, Halo Infinite was fine, but people forget how good of a run Halo had. Halo CE to Halo 2 to Halo 3 to Halo 3 ODST to Halo Reach, that is 5 insanely good games. Few series hit those highs. And it's why, to this day, even with not having a good, truly masterpiece of a game in over a decade, this series is still regarded so highly, and why so many people still see it the mascot of Xbox as a whole, even though Microsoft doesn't even treat it like that. It makes me sad, because this series is something truly incredible. I have friends that never grew up with Halo, and they only know about recent history. They only know about how the series has been squandered, and trying to explain this to them is so hard. Because to them, Halo was a couple of good games and inevitably run into the ground. I've tried so hard to get people unfamiliar with the series to play through this original trilogy, and it's so hard. And that's so sad, because few games in this list are going to get as much praise as I'm giving to Halo right now. The series means so much to me, whether it's the gameplay, the politics even, the graphics, the music. Man, I don't know what else I can say that hasn't been said a million times. So with that being said, please, if you haven't played through the series, or even if you had, and it's been a long time, they are worth a check out. And the Master Chief Collection is on sale for like $10. That's probably the best deal in gaming ever. It comes with 5 amazing games, or 4 if we're not counting Halo 4, and I could not recommend it enough. After Halo, I need to change pace, and I wanted to jump into something more familiar. Even though I'm already very familiar with Halo, there are few series that I'm as familiar with as Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic Adventure 2 is a game I have a complicated history with. Being a Sonic fan, it's hard to escape Sonic Adventure 2. Whether City Escape being one of the best opening levels to any game ever, to Live and Learn being one of the best songs ever introduced in a video game, Sonic Adventure 2 receives so much praise even today. And that's something I have felt very alienated with. I don't feel a strong connection to Sonic Adventure 2. As a kid, I was never really able to get into it. And this year, I wanted to really sit down and play it, and try my hardest to see what people love about this game so much. And I have to admit, that was really hard. But before getting into the negatives that will inevitably make a lot of people upset, I do want to talk about what makes this game so special and why I think it is remembered so fondly. Like I mentioned, City Escape is probably one of the best opening levels to any game ever. The vibe that it sets is almost enough to carry it throughout the pretty mediocre levels that are to follow. And the ending is phenomenal. I think a lot of people, when thinking about games from their childhood, only remember the peaks, and damn does Sonic Adventure 2 have some peaks. Even through my not so great experience with this game and trudging along through a lot of the slow and monotonous sections, it was hard not to feel pretty awesome at the end of the game. As cringe as it is, Sayonara Shao the Hedgehog is a phenomenal line that I quote pretty often because, well, yes, it's very funny. I think that experiencing the story of this game and seeing a send-off to one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite characters in the whole franchise, is so special. The aesthetic has yet to be matched in any Sonic game. I love the grungy aesthetic of this game. It's aged really well, and I love how all the characters are designed. I really like the power-ups. I like how your characters, especially Knuckles, over the course of the game, get these cool cosmetics. I love his goggles and his metal gloves. It's something I wish was brought back in Sonic games. The soundtrack is phenomenal, and all the Sonic and Shadow levels are, for the most part, pretty good. I had some slight issues near the end, and while yes, to an extent that is a skill issue, I think that something that has been said a million times over, the rails in this game sometimes just don't work. Like Final Rush, where it feels like the whole level is just rails, very frustrating. And that leads us to our negatives. Yes, people have talked about this game to death, and I'm sure you've heard a million times over how boring the Knuckles and Tails sections are. And yeah, that hasn't changed here. I really didn't like those stages. I think my least favorite were the Tails and Eggman ones. They just kind of suck. You're not really doing a whole lot. And they go on for what feels like so long. And when it comes to Knuckles and Rouge's stages, it's frustrating because in Adventure, I really like them. And the slight weird changes that they made in this game really just make it so frustrating. The levels are full of corridors and mazes that make going through them over and over again so frustrating, especially when in this game, they make you find them in a specific order and it's randomized every time. So no matter how many times I replay these levels, it just feels so clunky and frustrating. Don't even get me started on Rouge's levels. I really almost put down the game. I think I did a couple times when playing Rouge. They just last so long and are so big and frustrating. Maybe I just got unlucky with the Chaos Emerald spawns, and if I replayed them, maybe it would be better. But wow, I might even hate them more than the Eggman and Tails stages. I think Shadow's levels are a little lacking. I really like Sonic's first 3 levels, and I was really excited to play as Shadow. I think Radical Highway is great, but there's just something about his levels that doesn't feel as smooth as Sonic's do. I think overall, this game has a lot going for it, and I can see why so many people regard this as their favorite Sonic game. And I can see why it has aged so well in a lot of people's minds, because like I said, the peaks are very high. But for me, it was something that I was just not able to get into. Now, maybe in the future, I will replay it, feel more comfortable with it, and be able to get into it. That happened with Sonic Adventure. I really hated Sonic Adventure for the longest time, and now it's one of my favorite Sonic games because something just clicked for me. And maybe that'll happen here. But for now, I'm a little sad this game didn't click for me. And hopefully in the future, that'll change. After Sonic Adventure 2, I was a little frustrated. I felt insane playing a game that is regarded so highly and not really getting it. But out of nowhere, I saw a friend playing a little game called Super Kiwi 64. This is a short little indie game similar to something like Banjo-Kazooie, made by just one guy, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his username. You can find him on Steam and Twitter. I actually support their Patreon, and I think you should too. He makes a bunch of games, and I'm going to kind of clump them together here. I played Super Kiwi 64, Tori 3D, Tori 2, the Tori Jam Pack, as well as MacBack 64. Each game is about an hour or two long, and it's just really fun. It almost made me want to pick up a game engine and just make a fun little game. Each game controls super well, is super charming, and reminds me of simpler times. All these games are almost like tech demos, and Tori Saturn is coming out later this year, and I'm very excited as it seems like everything they've learned from these small little games put into one larger game. I'm not expecting a grand adventure, but I'm really excited to see what they've learned from making these short little games. Each one of these games can be bought for like $1, and if you have an hour to spare, you should definitely check these games out. So around this same time, as I was sort of just rummaging through these short little indie games, I was also playing Rayman. Rayman Legends is a game I've owned on Switch physically and has sat on my shelf collecting dust for maybe about 6 years at this point. I've always wanted to play it. I've heard people talk it up for a very long time, and as someone who loves 2D platformers, I felt like it was an obligation to at some point play through both Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends. I played through Rayman Origins on PC, and I really wish this game would get updated. They have not touched PC ports of this game at all, and you can definitely tell. I had some slight issues with crashing and alt-tabbing that made the experience a little frustrating, but overall I think these games have aged very well. Rayman Origins has reminds me a lot of Newgrounds and Flash animations, and I loved that. It was super charming. I think the level themes, while a little generic, you know, you're playing through a grass level and then a desert level and then an ice level, I think they all felt great and very fun. Rayman at first felt a little slow, but it's almost like you have to build momentum. Not in a Sonic type of way, but you'll notice you can slide down slopes and time your jumps just right and use your attack to boost yourself forward. That getting into a flow state in both of these games, but specifically as I was learning Rayman Origins, felt really fun. I was getting a little fatigued as this game kind of runs for a long time relative to other 2D platformers. I think it took me about 9 hours to beat, which, like I said, for a 2D platformer is kind of a long time. I was definitely feeling fatigued, but I still walked away from the experience feeling really refreshed. This is such an amazing game, and it's so sad to see that this series has sort of been forgotten by Ubisoft. I do think there is a Rayman game currently in development, but it's sad that we haven't seen another entry in the 2D platformer spin-offs. But that leads us right into Rayman Legends, which is the game that everyone talks up. I feel like Rayman Origins sort of gets forgotten a little bit because Rayman Legends is essentially the same thing, but better. And weirdly, well, yes, I think Rayman Legends is the definitive version of this formula, I did kind of have an issue, and that was that it sort of just feels like a collection of levels. There isn't really a story here. You essentially are just running through different level themes, and again, it goes on for about 9 hours, and that definitely didn't help the fatigue that I was feeling up to this point. A lot of my compliments towards Rayman Origins can be said for Rayman Legends. It truly is an amazing 2D platformer. If you've had this game on the back burner like me, I definitely recommend it. I played Rayman Legends handheld on Switch as I was out of the house a lot of the time during this part of the year, and it is almost a perfect game for the Switch. Just a game you can load up, play a couple levels, put down. It was amazing. I think this game goes on sale a lot, and it's hard to go wrong with a game like Rayman Legends. Like I mentioned, I was out of my house a lot of the time during this part of the year. I had a lot of stuff going on, wasn't really feeling great, and didn't really have the time to sit down at my desk and play games like I usually would. So for the most part, I was kind of only playing games on my Switch. And for some weird reason, maybe it was on sale or I saw something online, but I really wanted to play BioShock 1. I had played Infinite earlier, like we talked about, and after finishing Infinite, I definitely wanted to go and check out the beginning of this series. So yeah, I played this game on the Switch, which I know is not the definitive way to play this game. Now, I do want to clarify that after I completed it on the Switch, I also did check it out on PC, and it is definitely a much better experience on there. The definitive edition or collection that they did is still a little weird. Playing on mouse and keyboard really just doesn't feel right. I think this game was made for a controller. It's not unplayable by any means, but it's weird with the re-releases of this game. You can still feel a lot of the jank that came with the original PC port. There are some cases where the original PC Steam version is the better version to play, so it's really weird in that regard. But for now, we're talking about the Switch version. It actually ran pretty well. I played this game entirely on handheld mode, which yes, I know is insane, but they have a lot of handicaps that make aiming a lot easier, and overall, I think it was a good time. The frame rate wasn't the best, the textures weren't the highest resolution, but I still found time to appreciate Rapture. The layout of Rapture really does feel like a place that could exist, and it really made me want to explore every area. There are times when I got lost and maybe got a little frustrated, but overall I think they designed Rapture so beautifully, and I think it's why this game has aged so well. Almost after beating it, I went into New Game Plus and completely explored everything that I had missed in my first playthrough. Unlocking power-ups and being able to explore areas that I previously wasn't able to was so satisfying. While I didn't toy around with every one of the abilities, even just the basic ones that you get and will probably end up using throughout your first initial playthrough are still super satisfying. Freezing enemies, setting them on fire, getting big daddies to fight for you. It was awesome. I think playing on a handheld mode on the Switch did remove some of the horror elements of this game, but there was definitely still times like my first encounters with a big daddy that were still pretty scary. By the end of the game, I definitely wasn't feeling that. I was just easily one-shotting them and destroying them with my abilities, but I think there's something to be said about the atmosphere that even on handheld mode on a Switch, this game is able to set. Few games from the 7th generation have aged as well as BioShock has. I don't really want to get into spoilers, as I think the twist for this game is still incredible, and being someone that somehow avoided all spoilers through this game almost made my jaw drop when I got to the end. It puts the whole game into perspective and will make a second playthrough almost entirely different. The game isn't very long, so it makes multiple playthroughs pretty easy. I think it's definitely a game that's worth a check out. You can find this game very cheap all the time. The collection is on sale all the time. And like I mentioned, if you have a console, I think it's probably best on there. But if you have a PC, I'm sure you could find this game on like CD keys or something for a couple of dollars. And if that's the case, definitely give this game a shot. We're not going to talk about it because I actually didn't complete it. I played about halfway through BioShock 2, and that is also a great game. I'm not going to sit here and give a full review of it because, like I said, I didn't complete it, but it really does make this collection a hell of a deal, and if you can find it on sale, which it, like I said, is all the time, definitely give it a shot. Similar to BioShock 1, I don't really know how I got around to playing this game. Super Meat Boy is a game that I have admired for such a long time. I am an Xbox 360 kid. Right behind me, I have a shelf with over 100 Xbox 360 games, and because of that, I find indie games from this era to be so nostalgic to me. I think Xbox 360 truly was the rise of indies, whether it's games like Castle Crashers or Battle Block Theater or Super Meat Boy or Fez. There are endless games from this era that have aged so well, and Super Meat Boy is one of those games. I fucking love Super Meat Boy, dude. I mean, there's really not much I can say. There isn't a deep story, there isn't anything overly exceptional about this game. It's just a great time. I love the overly gruesome vibe of it, just exploding with blood whenever you fall into a razor. And I think that it's a great challenge. I think a lot of people talk this game up as being this impossible 2D platformer, but the way the game handles being able to instantly restart and play levels when you mess up makes it very easy to trial and error your way through this game. I don't think it was overly difficult by any means, and maybe that's just because I am pretty decent at 2D platformers, but this game felt great. Now, I know there are some differences from the original release and the version that I played on Steam. Like, I know there's new music and I think new graphics, and I can't comment towards that as I don't really remember what the original game was like. I know I sort of messed with it and toggled with it, but I think I played on all of the new settings. And even with that, as I have seen there be some disagreements on which version is best, I still had a great time. I think the music is catchy, and that, similar to like I said with in that early 2000s and that Newgrounds sort of flash animation style, still has aged so well. Not a whole lot I could say about this game other than it's a fun time, and I'm sure you could find this game for super cheap at pretty much any platform, and it's about a couple hours of a really good time. I definitely recommend it. Similar to Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Colors is a game that I simply just do not understand. This is a game that reviewed very well, Sega thinks very highly of it, and I know a lot of fans really like this game. But over the years, I just have not been able to get into it. And I don't think it's for the typical reasons. A lot of people make fun of the story, or the fact that the game is mostly 2D, and Those things actually aren't the biggest issue to me. I don't care that Sonic doesn't have a super deep story, even if it is something that I would prefer, like we saw with Sonic Frontiers. And I don't think it being 2D inherently makes it a bad game. I think, like we saw with Sonic X Shadow, which we will get into later, the 2D Shadow levels feel amazing, but it's how it's implemented in Sonic Colors and therefore Sonic Colors Ultimate that ruins it. Sonic just feels so stiff, and it feels like these levels are just thrown together with random assets. And that really starts to get frustrating once you realize that that is like 90% of this game. The opening level, just like a lot of Sonic games, almost tricks you into thinking that this is a good game. Not saying it's bad, but it's not anywhere near the standards that I personally have for Sonic, and for how a lot of reviewers talk about this game. There's a joke that this is reviewers' favorite Sonic game, and I personally just do not see that. I think specifically talking about Ultimate here, this is barely a remaster and barely a definitive edition. I would almost just say to go emulate the original version, or if you have a Wii, to hook that up and play that. I think the changes that they make with the color and the overly high use of bloom make this game look really ugly. I think the cosmetic stuff that they added really don't add anything, and some of the new collectibles just sort of feel pointless. I wasn't overly excited about this game when it came out, and playing it at the time, I played about a couple levels and then put the game down. Knowing that a lot of people really like Sonic Colors, I wanted to at least say that I beat the game. And beating the game really did not change my mind at all. Sort of, but not even close to Sonic Adventure 2. I think Sonic Colors has some really high highs. I think the opening level and a lot of the 3D levels do feel great. It makes me wish that that was just the whole game, but they padded out with so many 2D levels that it's impossible to ignore. I do not recommend this game. Like, I seriously don't. There are very few Sonic games that I could recommend to people who aren't Sonic fans, and this is not one of them. I do not think this game has aged well, and it's hard for me to find anything nice to say about this game. I know that sounds like I'm being harsh, but considering this game was released for almost full price only a couple years ago, that's really sad. And it's a shame to see what this game could have been. Hey, cutting in real quick, all the footage you're going to see is again from trailers similar to Hi-Fi Rush. This game isn't currently available, which is why I played it to begin with, which I'll talk about. So a lot of the footage you're going to see here is from trailers. I sadly just didn't record any footage when I was playing it. And when I did play it, I sort of had to take an alternative route to get my hands on it, and I don't have that copy anymore. So I'm sort of out of luck here. Sorry about that, but whatever. This next game is a little weird. It's a game that you probably know about, or at least have seen, but you probably haven't seen for a long time. And that is Spec Ops: The Line. Now, it's out of nowhere because this is a game that most people have not thought about for a very long time. Just up until around a year ago when it got taken down from all stores across all platforms. I believe this is due to some copyright issues with the music, and the music in the game is very important, so it's not just like they can remove it and be done with it. But it was very sad to me that a game like this that I remember from my childhood on the Xbox 360 essentially being erased. And I kind of wanted to pay my tributes a little bit. But I don't own the game. I don't own it on disc, and I never bought it on PC or digitally. So I had to use some workaround methods to get my hands on this game. I had a very interesting time. This is definitely a 7th generation game. You can definitely tell that, but I still was surprised at the imagery in this game. I don't want to spoil it because I do think this is a game still worth playing today, and there are a lot of twists and turns in the story, but I do want to show a couple screenshots and clips of just really amazing scenery and shot composition and moments where I just sat there and stared at what I was looking at. Sure, the facial animations and character models are definitely dated and are well over a decade old at this point, but I think this game still ages really well when looking at its themes and just overall imagery. I think a lot of the game is pretty generic. The gameplay is essentially just a cover shooter, and a lot of it is a generic military shooter from this era. But I don't think that completely takes away from a lot of the things this game does great. Like I said, I think you should go and play this game, and I think it warrants even maybe a couple playthroughs, as there are a lot of twists and turns and themes that you're probably going to miss on your first playthrough. Some of them are probably a little controversial, but I still think it's a great time. I want to recommend it, but you can't really get this game unless you happen to find a link for it somewhere on a website that might not be completely legal. But if you are able to at some point get your hands on this game, I definitely recommend it. There's not a lot I can say without spoiling it, so I think I'll just leave it at that. I really love boomer shooters. I love Doom, and I've played a million games like it over and over again. And essentially once a year, I will at least play one boomer shooter. And for this year, that one game was Boltgun. This is a game that has been on my radar for kind of a long time at this point, pretty much ever since it came out. I'm not a Warhammer guy. I've always been interested in 40K, but I really know nothing about it. And this game just looked really cool in general. It looked like everything that I usually would love in a boomer shooter, and to top it all off, it was on Game Pass. So despite playing it on a controller, which is probably not the best way to play it, I assume it probably feels much smoother on a mouse and keyboard, I decided to load it up on my Xbox Series S and played it essentially all in one sitting. It's not a long game by any means, and it really doesn't waste your time. This game looks phenomenal. There aren't really a lot of games I can compare this to. The 3D, but still like pixelated vibe of it, it's really hard to explain, but it looks so beautiful and will age phenomenally. All the weapons are really fun to use, and a lot of the enemies, while really annoying and at some points really ball busting, are fun to learn and work around. This is just another boomer shooter. And there aren't a lot of ways to innovate on this formula. But Boltgun does a really good job at taking what works and perfecting it. I don't know if this game is still on Game Pass, and I assume it's an indie game that will go on sale. If you like this genre or even have a slight interest in Warhammer like I do, but don't even really know anything about it, this is a really great game to dip your feet in. Like I said, I beat it in one long stretch of like 6 hours over a night, and I had a great time. Speaking of Game Pass and Xbox, I have been really interested in Hellblade for a very long time. I didn't really know anything about it, but I remember seeing it and being really intrigued. Even being a PS4 and Xbox One game, now playing this on the Series S, it still looks phenomenal. And just like Boltgun, it was on Game Pass. This also happened to align with the second game coming out just a week from when I wanted to play the first game. So I decided that I wanted to prepare myself for Hellblade 2 because it looked really promising. So I wanted to sit down and play the original. This game is weird. It is usually made fun of as a movie game, and the second game we will get into with a lot of similar complaints. But I think if you sit down and just immerse yourself in the world and pretend that you are Senua going through this just almost horrifying journey with her psychosis and whatever weird trauma she is battling that you don't really find out about until around the end of the game. And if you take it at that instead of going for an action-based epic adventure, this game is really something special and can be completely isolated from the second game if you choose to do so. Like I said, it's aged beautifully. The combat, while very simple, is flashy and satisfying. Yes, you are just walking a lot of the times and solving basic puzzles, but the environments are beautiful and make walking through them and taking in the scenery very satisfying, to the point where I don't really care that I'm not doing a whole lot. That's also helped by the fact the game isn't really that long. I don't really remember how long it took me, maybe like 5 to 6 hours, so it doesn't waste your time either. I would definitely be complaining if the environments were boring, and on top of that, it made me sit there for 9 hours. But this game doesn't really do that. It has a focus, taking you through Senua's journey, or Senua's Saga, or whatever the game is called. And I think it does a great job with that. This is another game that's really hard to talk about without spoiling it. But trust me, I think if you have a nice setup, a nice monitor, and some nice headphones, this is a game that you really won't get an experience like this anywhere else. There are few games that match the audio quality of this game, and truly, I think it deserves praise over and over for how well they're able to do it. Now that kind of leads us right on to Hellblade 2. So Hellblade 1 I really liked, but I had a lot of issues with it, right? I think that the gameplay was, really simple. The combat was, again, really simple, but I liked Senua. Her acting was so good, and I was really excited to see where Ninja Theory would take it. Ninja Theory has made a lot of really great games. Even if they don't make a good game, they know how to make a fun game. Devil May Cry DMC, the reboot of Devil May Cry, is not a really good game, but it's fun. The gameplay is actually really great despite the awful story, and I had a lot of faith that they would take a lot of the criticism of Hellblade and make a much more fleshed out adventure. Sadly, that's not really the case. We're essentially getting more of the same, and in some cases, less. The combat is somehow even more simplified. You're only facing one person at a time, and it's much more cinematic. And the first couple fights you do, it feels really cool. It almost feels like you're playing a movie. But once you get past that 2-hour mark, which again, this game isn't very long, but still, once you get a couple hours in, you really start to feel how formulaic and just how simple the combat is. You've already witnessed all the cool flashy animations and you realize there really isn't any experimentation to be done here. The puzzles are essentially more of the same. There are definitely some cool visuals to be had here, and they are slightly different from the first game, but you're kind of just doing the same thing again. I was really sad that they didn't explore a more action-oriented game, or at least more variety, because you're just doing the same thing. Complete a puzzle, walk around a little bit, and fight a guy here and there. Now, I do think there is still some praise to be had here. Just like the first game, this game is beautiful, and might be the best looking game I've ever seen. Truly, even on the Series S, which I know is not the most powerful console in the world, this game looked almost photorealistic at points. This game truly does look amazing. And on top of that, the acting is also maybe the best I've ever seen in a video game. And I'm really glad that the actor was able to take home an award at the Game Awards, because she fucking deserves it, man. I don't even think she really has that much acting experience outside of the Hellblade series, so to see her portray Senua in such a genuine and emotional way is so impressive. And I think that I'm doing this game a disservice if I don't give this game the praise it deserves. But at the same time, it doesn't make me any less disappointed in what this game could have been. This game was made fun of a lot at release because it's essentially just more of the same thing, and we had to wait such a long time for this game. On top of that, being at full price and really short. Now, it was on Game Pass, so I didn't pay for it at all, but I definitely wish there was more to this game. I do believe in Ninja Theory, and I am still excited to see whatever they can do next, as I believe they are still a phenomenal studio. And I hope this time around they really do look at the criticism, and if they do continue with the Hellblade series, make Hellblade 3 or whatever the next game is something special. So all these games were kind of being played in the span of like 2 weeks. I was really blazing through a couple games, and essentially a day or two after beating Hellblade 2, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake came out. I have always wanted to play Thousand Year Door, as it is one of my best friend's favorite games, and I've always admired it because this is someone who doesn't play a lot of games, having such immense respect for a specific game in particular. So that makes me think, well, this must be something special. And this remake was my excuse to finally jump into the game. I'm so happy I did. I can't lie, I've been a little disillusioned or not as interested in Mario. Since Odyssey, there really hasn't been anything that has grasped me. Mario has seemed very formulaic and very generic for a very long time now. So Thousand Year Door, I was a little afraid that this semi-lengthy RPG wasn't going to grab me. But this is maybe the first time I've ever actually cared about characters in a Mario series. All of the characters are so interesting and funny and actually have depth to them, something that is virtually absent in the rest of the whole series and subsequent Paper Mario games. Vivian goes down as one of my favorite Mario characters of all times. Same thing with Koops and Goombella. They are all so fun and truly makes you want to spend time in this world. I think this game really shows what Mario could be. I think Nintendo is so focused on having a specific image of Mario. They want it to be their Mickey Mouse. And they've been very successful at making him that. But I think that doesn't allow them to be more creative and flesh out the worlds. In every other Mario game, every Koopa looks the same, and you forget that these are a race of people. But in this game, they all look different and unique and all have different personalities. The same thing goes for Goombas and the Toads and all the other Mario characters that I'm so used to just seeing be copy and pasted throughout whatever game they're in. It, for the first time in maybe forever, made me appreciate the Mario universe. And it also made me sad that Nintendo doesn't do this more often, and with Mario Brothership that just came out, it seems like it's more of the same generic Mario world, and that's really sad. This might be my favorite Mario game of all time. Truly, it's that good. I think the gameplay, while yes, turn-based and not really my thing, I think is still really fun and hooked me even from the beginning. This is a game I've already wanted to go back and replay, not even a year after it came out, and there is a lot of content. I think my playthrough took me around 30 hours, but I could have easily spent, 50 to 60 hours just doing all the side stuff and playing the little challenges they have throughout the world. I could not recommend this game enough, even if you're not an RPG guy, even if you're not a Mario guy. This game is something special and is why it is remembered as fondly as it is, even 20 years after it came out. And I also truly don't think Nintendo is going to hit the highs of this game, kind of ever again. I know that's maybe a little hyperbolic, but man, this game is something special, and I could not recommend it enough. Coming off of a marathon that I essentially did in the past couple of days, but weeks with Hellblade and Boltgun and 1,000 Year Door, I think I needed something that was just simple, something that was a little bit more comfortable and in my wheelhouse. And I think one game I've been wanting to actually sit down and complete for a long time is Sonic Advance 2. The Sonic Advanced series is something that is very nostalgic to me, but for a little bit of a weirder reason than just playing the games as a kid. I actually didn't play these games as a kid. Even though I had a Game Boy Advance and I loved Sonic, for some reason I just never got these games. But the sprites for this game are iconic. They've been used in so many Flash animations, specifically Super Mario Ball Z, Sonic Flash, and so many other projects that even though I haven't played the game, I am weirdly nostalgic for them. Almost in a similar way that I was with Half-Life 2. I didn't play Half-Life 2 until somewhat recently, yet I was surrounded by the source engine and all of its assets. I have played Sonic Advanced 1 and I am slightly familiar with the series, but for some reason I've heard so much talk about Sonic Advance 2. When looking into it deeper, I think most people aren't able to agree on what is the best one. Some people love the first one, second one, and a lot of people like the third one. So I wanted to actually sit down and see for myself how well have these games aged. They haven't been ported at all to any other platform and are essentially trapped on the Game Boy Advance, but I still see so many people talk them up and I myself have somewhat of an appreciation for them. So I sat down and I played Sonic Advanced 2. I think I actually had a really good time with Sonic Advance 2. Sonic Advanced as a series, as I will get into as I talk about some of the later games further on in the video, have a very weird design philosophy compared to the other 2D games. The people behind Sonic Advanced are the same people that are behind Sonic Rush and some of the other Sonic games like Sonic 4, and if you play all those games, you can see very similar design philosophies, specifically with the constant endless falling pits that you will for sure fall in over and over and over again. This is my biggest complaint with these games. It is so frustrating to be smooth sailing, really feel like you're getting a hold of the level after retrying it over and over and over again. You make one mistake and you fall down a pit and die and have to restart all over again. I think a lot of people complain about Sonic in general, that he's too fast and you can't see enemies coming. To me, that has always been a cop-out. I think if you have the reaction time and you are dedicated to learning the game, even in the 4:3 aspect ratio that the original Sonic Trilogy came in, you can see and react to any enemy and any spike and any spring that they are going to throw at you. But in Sonic Advance 2 and the whole series in general, there are things that you will simply just have to die from and have to do trial and error to get over. And to me, I kind of hate that. Even though I am a defender of the series and think that multiple playthroughs is the correct way to play the 2D Sonic games, I think Sonic Advanced 2 is so punishing with this stuff, which is a shame because the music, the characters, the simple story are all so charming, and I'll be just vibing, having a good time, will completely kill any momentum I had up to that point. Playing this game without save states is almost impossible, at least it feels like to me. I completed it with save states, even though I tried my hardest not to, but there are just so many times when I would die to something that, even as a Sonic veteran myself, really just felt was kind of bullshit. I think these games have still aged really well, and if you do put in the time to learning these games, and specifically Sonic Advance 2 with the levels, I think that this is a product of its time. You know, that early 2000s adventure era Sonic, where they weren't afraid to just be cool. Sonic in this game is so cool. His sprites, his attitude, it's so weird, but I love this version of Sonic. This might be one of my favorite versions of Sonic because he's almost reminiscent of something like Goku or an anime character. And you see that when you go super in these games. The main thing I can think about is just the pits, and a lot of the level design really aren't for me. I think a lot of the levels can be confusing and seem like almost mazes where a lot of times you're going vertically rather than horizontally. I also think that they don't explain a lot of the extra moves you have very well at all. I, in some cases, didn't even know I had them until I watched someone else play this game and see them do a move that I had no idea I had. And that would have made the game probably a lot easier. I think this game would benefit greatly from a widescreen modern port. And I really hope that Sega at some point does that, because I still think these are great games that are trapped on the Game Boy Advance. How these haven't been re-released even on something like the Switch Online is baffling to me. And I hope that one day we will see that. Tomb Raider 2013 is an interesting game. I have always had a weird fascination with Tomb Raider, even though I have never played them. But a lot of my friends throughout the years have always talked up the newer games, especially Rise of the Tomb Raider, which I knew I wanted to play. So I thought, well, I may as well start with this one, because for some reason I own this game. I have no recollection of buying it. I don't remember ever playing it. I don't think I ever did, but it's just been rotting in my Xbox library. So I thought, well, I may as well just start with this one. And I weirdly really liked this game. I know a lot of people compare these games to the Uncharted series, and while I can't say anything to that as I haven't played any Uncharted game, this game just does what it wants to do really well. The movement and platforming is really satisfying, the puzzles are very intuitive, and the gunplay is really nice. I was not expecting this game to have aged so well. Now, this is the definitive edition. I know this game was originally released on the 360 and the 7th generation, so I'm sure that version is a little bit rough, but I think most people have probably played the definitive edition as it came out not too long after the original release. And it feels so smooth, at least on my Series S, and I'm assuming on PC and PS4 as well. It just feels so smooth to play, which I think a lot of games from the early Xbox One era can't really say. I think the voice acting and the story is kind of just whatever. I wasn't really a big fan of Lara Croft as a character. Not that I didn't like her, there just wasn't really anything there for me. Nothing really gripping me to this story, other than just the game simply being fun. If you could find this game for free or on sale, I highly recommend you check this game out, as I think it gets overshadowed by its sequel when this game, not to spoil a little bit later on, but I think I like this game more. Since I was already on Xbox and I was looking for something to play with my girlfriend, I thought that Gears of War would be the perfect game. This is a game I've been wanting to play for a long time and that I have such a deep connection with. Being a kid that grew up on Xbox 360, Gears of War feels like an institution to me, even though it's a series that I'm sure a lot of kids now probably don't even know about, similar to Halo. Which is really sad because even going back to the original Gears of War, it has aged so well. I know there is a re-release or remaster or remake that they did of this game that you can play on Game Pass and on PC and stuff like that, but the original game holds a very special place in my heart. I love the almost horror aspect of this game. Similar to what I said about the original Left 4 Dead, it's very gray and there's a lot of use of lighting to make the environment feel very ominous, to make the world feel so helpless. You are a hulking man that is just going around chainsawing locusts and destroying anything that comes in your path. Like I said, I played this game co-op, and I think that is probably the best way to experience these games, as they are completely built around it. Playing this game with a friend or a significant other is a great time, and it's not even that long of a game. I think it took me maybe about 5 or 6 hours, and I took my time looking for collectibles and really exploring the levels. It almost made me sad a little bit because Gears of War, similar to Halo, is such a phenomenal series that is rooted in Xbox's history, but almost seems like it's been forgotten. I know there is E-Day coming out, which looks amazing, and I really hope that that is able to bring Gears of War to the forefront again, because even going back to the original, man, it is such an amazing series. After playing both Tomb Raider and Gears of War, I think at this point I was a little burnt out of cover shooters, and I think a perfect game to jump into at this time was Pseudoregalia. I know, a very weird change of pace, but a really good game. This is an indie game that I've had a weird relationship with. I had always heard about it and I recognized the main character, but I never really put 2 and 2 together until I believe Oni Plays or some channel did a video on it, and it reminded me that this game exists. I ended up watching some gameplay of it and decided, well, I got nothing better to do. I may as well sit down and play this game. And I'm so happy I did. I think I beat this game all in one night. It's not a very long game, and it's simply just fun. Moving around in this game is so satisfying, and the low poly aesthetic is something that I've been wanting out of indie games for a long time. I think for so many years we have been almost oversaturated with the pixelated 2D indie game art style, and I've always been wanting a return to the low poly aesthetic, and I think Pseudoregalia does that perfectly. The simple aesthetic of this game fits the vibe so well. I think this labyrinth, or whatever you want to call it, that you're moving through is super interesting and frequently gives you new challenges, as well as allowing you to become familiar with the base movement, which is the main sticking point of this game. The base movement is so satisfying. You're not doing any crazy combat, or there really isn't any crazy story here. You're sort of just jumping around and parkouring as this goat girl or whatever. I don't even know how to explain it. All I can say is that it's just a fun game. I've tried to recommend this game to people before, and it's almost hard, as I think it gives off maybe, the name is hard to say. It doesn't really have a story that I can recommend. There really isn't a whole lot here, but what is here is amazing. I will definitely be checking out whatever this dev does next, as I could not have been any more pleased with what I got here. Talking about Xbox franchises that have been abandoned, one that has certainly been completely abandoned, not even talking about something like Halo or Gears of War, is Banjo-Kazooie. This is a franchise that I love to death. I could talk about it forever. I know this might make people mad, but I'm one of the few people who believe this game is better than Mario 64. I think it has aged better, and I think playing this game again on the Rare Replay port that they added to Xbox One only confirmed that for me. I wish so badly that literally any other company other than Microsoft owned Banjo-Kazooie, as there is so much here that isn't being utilized. The world is still so charming, and it is so unique, even coming from an era where polygonal 3D platformers were around every corner. I think a lot of people criticize that you have to unlock abilities, and I think while yes, the game might have a slow start, there is so much here, and the levels are so fun to explore, and there is so much personality from what is essentially just an N64 game. Now yes, I did say I am playing the Rare Replay version, which is, by the way, side note, a phenomenal port. I mean, any company that is looking to port older games to newer hardware, look at what Rare did with Rare Replay. I originally tried to play this game on the Switch Online, and there it is so weird. It feels like there's input delay, and it doesn't have widescreen, and the frame rate is super low. So I immediately went over to my Xbox, loaded up Rare Replay, and it was buttery smooth. If I had to say one thing to get people to play this game, or at least just have one takeaway for myself, it would just be the vibes. I mean, there are so few games that capture a vibe like Banjo-Kazooie, even games that specifically go out of their way to try to, like Yooka-Laylee, and just fail. I'm someone who, like I mentioned earlier, cannot really handle a lot of jank, and it has stopped me from playing so many great games, especially from the PlayStation 1/N64 era. But Banjo-Kazooie has aged so well that jank is almost non-existent. It's so weird to say, especially when talking about the N64, where so many games feel almost unplayable to a modern audience. This is such a cute and charming game, and man, I wish we had more of these. I know we got Astro Bot in 2024, which was an amazing return to form for 3D platformers, but it's so sad that it almost feels like we only have Mario nowadays, when there is so much to be had and experienced with 3D platformers. If you haven't, for some reason, even gave Banjo-Kazooie a try, please give it a shot. I don't know how many times I've recommended a game in this video, but Banjo-Kazooie really does hold a special place in my heart. I have a plushie literally 3 feet away from me and an amiibo behind me. I love this game to death, and I could not recommend it more. After playing Tomb Raider 2013, I was definitely ready to jump in the Rise of the Tomb Raider. I've always had friends talking about it, and I myself have been really interested in it. It has been, the talk of the town in a lot of circles, and is the closest thing to Uncharted outside of PlayStation. So I wanted to really sit down and give this game a shot. I already ran into an issue though. I wanted to play it on console as I played it Tomb Raider 2013 on my Xbox, and unfortunately there is no next gen, or I guess technically current gen, patch for this game, as in there is no upgraded patch for Xbox Series or PlayStation 5. Now that wouldn't be an issue if the base game on Xbox One and PS4 didn't run like shit. This game has motion blur, input delay, only runs at 30 frames, and makes playing on console in the current day feel very cumbersome and outdated. Now, I just sucked it up and I got this game on computer. This game almost has the Crisis treatment, as even now it will really test your PC's capabilities. I don't have a bad PC by any means, but there were definitely points where I thought I had to turn down the settings, because this game really makes itself look nice with all the snow particles and the hair effects. It's genuinely very pretty, but man, I was so surprised how this relatively old game was running on my computer. But when talking about the actual game, I had a lot of fun, and I don't know if this is going to be a hot take. I think I liked 2013 a little more. I think the crafting and slightly open world aspect of this game is not fleshed out enough. I think the world is very beautiful, and I think the crafting has a lot of potential, but I don't think it is fleshed out enough to where I really wanted to explore it and make full use of it. So I kind of didn't. I got through the whole game pretty much just crafting healing items and whatever was necessary to progress the story, which the story is okay. I mean, the original game didn't stick out to me at all. I think that this game is essentially more of the same. They changed the face model, and I know a lot of people like the new one more, but I think I kind of like the old Lara Croft a little more. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but the new one looks a little uncanny to me, and considering she still has the same voice, it's definitely a little weird going straight from Tomb Raider 2013 to Rise of the Tomb Raider. The weapons and gunplay is all very nice. I actually really loved the bow and arrow in this game, and hunting animals is really fun and a nice side thing to do in between doing main story objectives. The world, despite being a little cumbersome on my computer, is very pretty, and I had a really fun time just walking around and looking at the environments. I don't know if I liked it over 2013. I thought that 2013 was a very pretty game. Nothing groundbreaking. I think that objectively, Rise of the Tomb Raider is prettier, but I think that just the smoothness and fluidness of 2013 made the game feel very pretty to me, if that makes sense. But so far, this trilogy has been amazing. I think that 2013 and Rise of the Tomb Raider are phenomenal games, and I would definitely recommend them to anyone who gave them a shot. I still have not played the third game, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and I don't know if I ever will, as by the end of Rise of the Tomb Raider, I was feeling a little fatigued. I still feel a little out of it, and don't necessarily know if I'm going to give it a shot, as the reviews for it are basically that it's just more of the same and not particularly better, and in some cases worse than Rise of the Tomb Raider. Regardless, that doesn't take away from Rise of the Tomb Raider kind of being its own little isolated story. You can kind of just play this game, not even really 2013, and be fine. Sure, you may not know a character here and there, but that's not really a big deal, and I think that's probably what most people did. Like, I know a lot of people who love Rise of the Tomb Raider but have never played 2013, so that being said, this game goes on sale all the time. Play it on PC if you can, and I really hope this game gets a definitive edition or just a free upgrade, because, man, the console versions of this game are a little rough. This next game, I have a lot to say. I have wanted to play the Yakuza or Like a Dragon series for a very long time. This is a very infamous series, a very iconic series in gaming, as there are seemingly a million games, and they all are very long and arduous RPGs, but it has always been so enticing to me. The style, the combat, the goofy clips I see online, a lot of the memes that have been shared throughout the years have always made this game something that I really wanted to check out. And a bunch of the Yakuza games are on Game Pass. I don't think all of them are, but at least a good chunk of them are. I decided, well, I may as well start. I don't think there is any better way to start this series than with Yakuza 0. Funnily enough, the first couple hours of this game didn't really grab me, and that is the same sentiment I've heard from a lot of my friends that I've tried to get to play this game. There is a lot of reading and a lot of exposition that make the first couple hours a little draining, and at least for someone like me who really isn't that experienced in RPGs and doesn't really like reading subtitles and yada yada yada, it made the first couple hours a little rough. But I think around 4 hours in, something clicked for me. This game is phenomenal. The main story is really great, and the side quests that make this series famous are so fleshed out it's a little jarring, as I struggle to even call them side content. I, for most of the game, just focus on the main story, and only near the end did I start doing side stuff, and by that point it was kind of too late, and I regret how I handled playing it up to this point, as the side stuff are just as important in some cases as the main story. They flesh out the world, introduce characters, and make this relatively small section of Tokyo feel so alive and, in some cases, beautiful. You will see a random NPC, maybe one that's been copy and pasted throughout the world at this point, just going on about something pretty mundane, and eventually the side quest will lead into some really engaging minigame or side story that really has you hooked. That happened almost every time, where I would see a side character get roped into some side quest that I didn't want to do, feel bored and kind of sighed a little bit, and eventually by the end of it, I was enthralled. I was so surprised at how well it drew me in. There were multiple times when I didn't even realize I was doing a side quest, or they call it sub-stories in this game. I can see why Yakuza 0 really helped bring this series to the forefront in the West, as Yakuza has been a long-running series in Japan for a long time, but it has struggled to gain an audience here, and this game did the impossible and really hooked so many people like me into caring about this series. At the time of recording this, I am a couple games deep, and we will talk about another one of them later, and this game is responsible for that. I really don't want to spoil this because this game is... I mean, listen, I've played a lot of good games on this list, and this one is up there with the best of them. Even the legacy titles that I've talked about and I'm going to talk about later on. Truly a special game, and I will continue to recommend this game to anybody, even if I don't think they would enjoy it at first, because I didn't really enjoy it at first. No, not that I didn't enjoy it, but it was a little overwhelming. And I think there are a lot of points in this game where it is a little overwhelming. There is a lot to do in this game. I think I spent around 35 to 40 hours, and that's kind of a pretty light run. Now, the Yakuza games aren't actually that long as a lot of people make it up to be. The main stories are usually around 15 to 20 hours, but like I said, it's that side stuff that really boosts these games. And you can easily spend double to triple your playtime just doing side stuff, and that's where I think these games shine, and specifically Yakuza 0. I already want to go back and play this game again, but I got a lot of stuff on my plate, and we got a lot more games to talk about. So please, play this game. It goes on sale all the time. I could not recommend it more, and in 2025, I do expect to be playing the majority, if not, hopefully, all of the Yakuza games. But I guess when I make another one of these videos next year, you'll see if I was successful with that. Another series, similar to Yakuza, similar to BioShock, that has been a legacy and very respected series for a long time is God of War. This has long been a series that I have wanted to play for a very long time, and it wasn't until my girlfriend, who, similar to BioShock, really liked God of War, that got me to actually sit down and commit to playing essentially all of the games. But we gotta start off where it all started, and that's 2005's God of War. In 2023, I played the entire Devil May Cry series, and while Devil May Cry 1 and 3 are all amazing games, you can definitely feel the age a little bit with how the characters move and how the combos feel, which isn't to take away from those games, as Devil May Cry 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. But stepping into God of War, which took a lot of what made Devil May Cry and a lot of other stylish hack and slashes amazing, and refined them to something that is still so satisfying to this day. Everything feels so fluid, even in the original game. In the beginning, you don't really do a whole lot of damage, and you're only fighting a couple enemies at once, but you will quickly find yourself just destroying hordes of enemies and upgrading your weapons very quickly. This game isn't long by any means, and I think it's paced super well. I think the cutscenes are definitely a little cringe, as they have not aged very well, but if you could put that aside, I think there is still a very interesting story here, and sets the foundation for what will become a very interesting and respected series. I actually really liked the weapons that you get in this game. Kind of forget what it's called, but the big sword you get pretty early on I felt to be very satisfying. For the most part, I just used the Blades of Chaos, and those were able to get me through the whole game with upgrading them. But there are an assortment of weapons here that are all very satisfying to use. I miss games like this, and I think there is a void that is not being filled right now. Just over-the-top, fun games. There isn't some deep story here, at least not yet, and the gameplay is enough to carry me through this game. I think it took me around 8 hours, but you could easily knock down this game in 4 to 5 hours. Makes me really sad that none of these games except for God of War 3 are available on PS5 because I really would like a remaster. There is a rumored one now, but just give me the games. They don't have to be remakes or anything like that. Just give me the base games and I'll be happy. I would love to see some widescreen ports of these games put onto PS5, but I'll even take simple emulation. And this leads us right into God of War 2. God of War 2 immediately hooked me, as the opening is essentially right where you left off and has this huge spectacle with you fighting Athena. And this isn't spoilers, this is literally the first 5 minutes of the game. But it pretty much immediately fleshes out Kratos as a character and gives you motivation to go throughout the entire series, even up to the new games from 2018 and Ragnarok. I think God of War 2 is really where this series gets its footing. And I think a lot of people have this game as their favorite for that reason. It takes everything that God of War 1 did and does it better. I think the environments are much more fleshed out. The other weapons you get are way more satisfying. And the story is much more thoughtful. I think in the original, it had some pretty dated CGI and some moments that have been memed to death at this point. But I think God of War 2 really gets its footing on what story it wants to tell here, and is expanded in the PSP games, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But God of War 2 is a game that I have wanted to replay since playing it. And again, just makes me want to remaster. This game is phenomenal, and I played it through emulation, but I wish I could buy this game physically on a PS5 disc, and hopefully I'll get my wish someday. Even if it's just a digital download, I would really like to play this game, and I would like for more people to be able to experience these games, as if you don't have a PS2, a PS3 with a remastered collection, or a PC that can emulate it, you can't play these games. Which is weird, because God of War is one of PlayStation's main mascots, with 2018 and Ragnarok being some of their most successful games ever. So it's definitely a little weird. But my journey with the PS2 wasn't quite over yet. This year, in a lot of ways, was my PlayStation era, as I got a PS5, I got a PSP, last year I got a PS3, and I've been exploring this side of gaming that I missed out on as an Xbox and PC kid. Similar to God of War, a series that has always intrigued me, especially on PlayStation, and something that I missed out on for a long time was Sly Cooper, and I thought, well, I may as well play the first one, as it again is a pretty short game like the original God of War, and I beat it in about a day. This game has aged so well, and the characters are so charming. I think if I would have played this game as a kid, I would have been hooked immediately. And I can see why so many people still have such an attachment to the series after not getting a game for so many years at this point. I think the voice acting has aged really well. The art style is timeless, and while there isn't some deep story here, it was enough to carry me throughout the whole game. And like I said, it doesn't overstay its welcome, which I think is what makes these PS2 games age so well, is they do exactly what they're trying to do amazingly. Now, these games have been ported to the PS5, if I'm correct, and I definitely recommend checking them out. I played the HD collection through RPCS3, which is not the best way to play these games, but it was the easiest way for me, and I had a great time. Definitely recommend you guys check these games out. And I already feel like I have a connection to Sly, Bentley, Carmelita, all these really amazing characters. I hope with Astro Bot, which we will talk about a little bit later, I hope Astro Bot and the success that it had will get PlayStation to look at some of these series, because there is so much here that isn't being utilized. Sure, these movie games that Sony is doing now are amazing and definitely very successful, but I think there's a huge market they're missing out on that they could really be taking advantage of. After God of War 2, I was still very interested in God of War as a franchise. The lore and everything was really enticing to me, and I knew I was going to see this series to the end before I'd even started the first God of War game. And around this time, kind of coincidentally, I had actually gotten my hands on a PSP. So not being super familiar with PlayStation, let alone the PSP, I at least knew one of the games I was going to check out was God of War Chains of Olympus. And it was so cool being able to play this game on original hardware. It has been such a long time that I used a gaming handheld proper. Not really counting the Switch, I don't play games away from my setup. I don't really like phone games. I never owned a 3DS, and it's been so long since I've used the original DS. So sitting down and actually playing a couple games on a small little PlayStation 2 essentially was so cool. It's almost like the perfect form factor, and it still feels almost modern. I think the PlayStation 3 style menu has aged really well, but We're not talking about the PSP, we're talking about a game on the PSP, God of War Chains of Olympus. This game was not made by the main studio behind God of War, but rather a side team, and I think they did a really good job at recreating what made the original God of War games so good. I mean, this truly does just feel like a portable version of God of War. I think if you're a hardcore fan, and even me, someone who have just come off of playing the last two games, you can tell some slight differences here, and it's not as high quality as the other two, but it is aged surprisingly well. Now, this is a prequel to the God of War series, and I played these games in release order, which I think is kind of the best way to experience any franchise. I know I just talked about Yakuza 0, but that might be the one exception. And I do think the PSP games are essential for helping you understand Kratos, where he came from. Sure, if you just play the original trilogy, you'll get pretty much all you need, but I think that both this and Ghost of Sparta, which I'm not talking about in this video, but I did play a little bit of, really help lay the groundwork for what is such an amazing series. There was HD ports of this game released on the PS3, and I think that's probably the best way to go nowadays, especially if you can just emulate it. But this game is kind of what I wish we still had. Console style games that are made for a handheld. It's short, you can pick up and play, there are plenty of saves, and one of the issues I have with the Switch is that yes, it's so cool that it is essentially a home console on the go. At the same time, I can't really just pick a lot of games up and play them, especially the console games that are such a draw for the Switch. But this is, like I said earlier, essentially a PS2 game that is made to be picked up, played for 10-20 minutes, and then put down. I would frequently take it to school or work with me. I just play a level here and there and pick it up later when I'm home. I love that about the PSP library, and especially God of War Chains of Olympus. There isn't really too much I can say here that I haven't said about God of War 1 and 2, as it is essentially more of the same, and I think around this time I was a little fatigued. But that didn't stop me from immediately jumping into God of War 3. Now, this game I had a little bit of an issue with. At this point, I did not have a PS5, and emulating God of War 3 on RPCS3 is a little bit of a hassle. Unless you own a really good computer, it is hard to get this game to run well. And even if you have a good computer, the amount of effects and just way this game is built does not work well for emulation, and it's still taking them some time to get the kinks worked out. So I had to go out and buy this game physically and play it on an original PS3, which was actually really cool in the end. I was worried that playing it on original hardware would feel a little jank and a little old, but this game has aged so well. There was almost no frame drops, it still runs in at least what seemed to me 1080p, and somehow even further improved upon what made God of War 1 and 2 really great. The story takes place literally seconds after the second game ends, and is such a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. I think if you don't like God of War 2018, you can stop here and have a really nice complete trilogy similar to Halo. This game has aged so well, and I'm so glad that you can still play the HD version of this game on PS4 and PS5. They really need to get the whole trilogy on PlayStation 5 ASAP, because it is such a magical experience just playing through an entire series like this, especially one that has aged so well as God of War. I really loved all the boss fights with the different gods, and the way you defeat all of them, and the cutscenes and just interactions between them and Kratos is genuinely so interesting. I know nothing about mythology, let alone Greek mythology, but it got me to care about these characters and made me just want to take all them down. Especially Zeus, which pretty much throughout the whole series up to this point has just been this figure off in the distance that we have been chasing and eventually getting our hands on. And I don't really want to give a whole lot of spoilers here, but I mean, yeah, shocker, you win at the end. But I think the ending is still really great. It's not just, oh, you defeated all the gods and now you are this powerful being. You do defeat all the gods, but at least initially, it seems like Kratos died in doing so and released the power of hope to the rest of the world. It sounds a little corny as I'm describing it, but playing throughout this whole series and witnessing Kratos, who's just this, angry, violent dude, finally redeeming himself is so satisfying. I know there are people, like I think even the original creator, who don't like the progression between God of War 3 and 2018, but as I'll get to when we talk about 2018, I mean, this is one of the best evolutions of any character that I've seen so far in gaming. I do truly think it is that good. But that marked the end of God of War for me, a series that I had been wanting to play for, almost a decade. I finally got through at least the original trilogy, and I was very happy and pleased with myself. But kind of like I was talking about with Sly Cooper, I was definitely feeling a little bit of a PlayStation high. I was in my PlayStation era, and no better way to continue that with any other game than Ratchet and Clank. I knew almost nothing about Ratchet and Clank at this point. I knew of him and always thought the character designs and worlds were interesting, but, never owning a PlayStation, there was really no way I could ever experience it. And I didn't really have any intention, and still don't really have any intention, to play through the whole series, but I thought I may as well check out the first game to at least get my footing, as I knew when I was going to get a PS5, I wanted to play Rift Apart, so I at least thought, well, I may as well play one game before that. I think this game has aged pretty well. Not as good as Sly Cooper and God of War, but I think it's still really pretty. The game itself isn't graphically very impressive, especially when it's blown up on an HD display, but there's something about the environments that are just so pretty to look at. Like, there aren't a lot of shadows, and the shading is kind of shitty. The character models are still looking a little weird with the facial animations, but there's something about each individual world that you go to that really does make you want to explore it. I think Ratchet also controls not very great. He feels so heavy and sluggish, which is something that they do end up fixing later on, but with his original game, it definitely does feel a little weird and cumbersome at first. The same thing goes for his attacks, as swinging your wrench feels so heavy and, like I said, cumbersome, and sometimes makes fighting even just the basic enemies feel a little bit like a hassle or a task. But I do think it kind of makes up for it when you start getting all of the bolts and upgrades, as it is a really satisfying progression going through each world and genuinely becoming stronger. I think even in this original game, as his personality does progress later on in the series, I like Ratchet and Clank. I think their personalities are very charming and amusing. I pretty much immediately loved Clank, and Ratchet took a little bit to grow on me, and definitely did grow on me later on. It almost felt like I was watching a Disney movie, similar to Lilo and Stitch, which isn't a sentiment I've heard shared online, so maybe that's just a me thing, but there were definitely points where it felt like I was kind of playing a Disney game. It always was kind of interesting to me that PlayStation, which is a Japanese brand, have the majority, it seems like, of their first parties be made by Western devs, especially nowadays with Spider-Man, God of War, and The Last of Us. Overall, I had a decent time. This isn't a game I'd recommend to like a coworker or something like that, but I still think it's a great time, and it doesn't really overstay its welcome. I think it took me around 8 hours to complete, which I was definitely feeling fatigued. The final boss was really getting on my nerves, and I was almost wanting to break my controller, but you get through it, and it is a nice little self-contained story, which I always love. And would you believe it, I'm still not done. These next couple games are pretty much all PlayStation exclusives, and like I mentioned, I've had a PSP, and there was definitely a bunch of games I wanted to check out. One of those games was also a game my girlfriend grew up with, and I wanted to experience because of that, which is Daxter. I know absolutely nothing about Jak and Daxter, and if you don't know anything about Jak and Daxter and play Daxter, yeah, it's gonna be a little confusing. Apparently Jak was arrested, and I guess you're trying to get him back. I still have not played Jak and Daxter, so I pretty much don't know any of the specifics, but I know the general overview of what was happening here. But while I was playing, I had no idea what was going on. This game is super basic, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think I was still a little enamored by how well it looked on this little handheld, even in the current era when we have stuff like the Switch and the Steam Deck. Daxter felt really fun to control, and the combat felt weirdly satisfying. It's again super basic, but just squashing the little bugs and eventually taking out the big guys was really nice. I loved the environments, and parkouring through these little open areas was very satisfying. This also isn't a game I would go out of my way to recommend, as, I mean, unless you have a strong connection to Jak and Daxter, I don't really know why you would play this game. I was sort of just in the right place at the right time, and I'm glad I did, as I had a decent enough time to where I don't regret playing this game. And it again, just like the last couple games, doesn't overstay its welcome, and I was satisfied with what I had. I actually really like Daxter as a character, and I do eventually want to play Jak and Daxter, just right now I'm not really feeling it, and I don't want to push myself to play something that I'm not quite ready for. But it has got me interested in playing Jak and Daxter, so eventually I'll get around to it. Ratchet and Clank and Daxter were palate cleansers, as I, at this point, had just gotten a PS5, and funnily enough, I didn't get a PS5 game with it. I got a PS4 game, which is not going to be hard to guess, God of War 2018. This definitely isn't helping the argument that PlayStation 5 has no games, which isn't even a statement that I wholeheartedly agree with, but even at the time I think it was funny how I picked up a PS5 with a PS4 game. But playing the game, I actually didn't even really notice, as this game looks phenomenal on a PS5. Like I said earlier with God of War 3, I think Kratos is one of the best evolutions of any character in gaming, and I really do stand by that, and this game is what cemented that for me. After playing through the last 4 games and witnessing Kratos' story essentially finish, I was a little unsure of how they would handle it, but seeing him grown up and mature and essentially a whole different character is very interesting, as you're kind of already used to what Kratos should be in your head at this point. There are instances where you see the old Kratos sort of break through this mature, worn down version of Kratos, and it is very interesting. I actually don't want to spoil this game, and I'm not going to be talking about really a lot of the story here, but there are some very cool moments, especially if you are a big God of War fan, which I would assume if you are, you've already played this game, but this game is still relatively new, I guess. I'm doing quotation marks there, so I don't want to spoil it. But this game is phenomenal. It almost makes me scared to play Ragnarok because I don't know if this is going to live up to it and finish the series on a satisfying note for me. I know the God of War series isn't technically done, but up to this point it is done, so I'm a little worried to play Ragnarok. But focusing on 2018, I had a really good time. I don't think I like the combat in this game as much as the more zoomed out and hectic combat that we saw in the original series. I don't think it's bad by any means, but it definitely felt more like I was just 1v1ing certain enemies than like I was this overpowered god. Which I know a lot of the story is basically hiding the fact that you're god and being ashamed of it, but I think it would still have been fun to get more of that power trip. Which is to say they don't have that, as some of the boss fights are these huge, beautiful spectacles, and you definitely see Kratos' strength shine through, but I think the over-the-shoulder gameplay was not as engaging to me. I don't know if that is a common opinion. I'm sure it's not. But yeah, I was really satisfied. Going back to what I was saying earlier, I think this game is so beautiful. If you're playing this game on a PS5, it's kind of hard to tell it's even a PS4 game. Sure, if you look at a texture here and there, it might be a little low quality and blurry, but I think we're at a point now where you can take games from late last gen, just give them a nice HD bump, and they still look phenomenal, if not in some cases better than a lot of the PS5 exclusives that we see now. I think a lot of games are too ambitious and overall sacrifice a lot of performance and smoothness to make, I don't know, like a skin texture HD. It's funny how a lot of the most graphically impressive games that I've played on the PS5 have been PS4 games or just last gen games that have been sort of beefed up for the PlayStation. I think a lot of studios now are focusing on the wrong things. I know this is a little bit of a tangent and not really specific to God of War 2018, but I would 100% recommend this game along with the rest of the trilogy, and I'm so satisfied with the direction that it took the series. I haven't played Ragnarok yet, but even though I'm a little worried to see how they end off the series, I am still very excited to play it. Now, I mentioned that I had got a PlayStation 5, and you might be asking, why now, 4 years after the fact, am I getting a PlayStation 5? And I might be the only person to have ever done this, but I bought a PlayStation 5 for Astro Bot. I know this isn't a game that I think PlayStation even intended to sell consoles on, but this is the first PlayStation exclusive that has really drawn me in enough to actually go out and buy a PlayStation console. I love platformers, as you can tell by a lot of the platformers that we have seen on this list so far, and this game essentially looked like it did everything that I love and refined it, and that's what I got here. I don't want to spoil this game, and you might be saying, well, what is there to spoil? And that is true, as there isn't really a story here at all, but the levels and experiences and gameplay mechanics are really all you need to have a good time here. It's always weird recommending this game to people, because even people that I'll talk to in school or at work, I'll head over heels recommend this game, and they'll sort of give me a weird look, and when they ask further as to why they should play this game, I do sort of have a hard time answering that question, as this game doesn't really have one thing that it does really well. But I think that's what makes it so good, as it takes what has already been done and just refines it, and in some cases perfects it. There isn't insane graphical fidelity or some overarching story that will change your life, but you'll sit down and play this game and simply just have a good time. Which is what I think video games are meant for. This game is such a video game, if that makes sense. And even though I'm not the biggest PlayStation head, I still had a great time witnessing a lot of the references that they have in here. And there are a lot of references that aren't even PlayStation exclusive, like Kiryu from Yakuza is in this game, which I know is technically a spoiler, but that's just the only example that I could really give here. If you don't want to spend, $60 or whatever on Astro Bot, but you do have a PlayStation 5, please play Astro's Playroom, as it is a little bit definitely different from Playroom. I think Playroom still gives you an idea of what to expect in Astro Bot, and it's completely free and it's probably already installed on your console, so why not? I remember I played Astro's Playroom like 2 times before Astro Bot came out because I was just so excited, and this was my game of the year. And I'm glad that it has won all these awards since, because it definitely deserves it. And I hope that it has opened Sony's eyes to expanding their horizons a little bit. As like I was talking about with God of War, the over-the-shoulder gameplay is kind of all they do. And while yes, those games are very successful and people really like them, I think people are starting to get a little tired of them, me included. And I hope that this has opened their eyes a little bit here. Astro Bot is phenomenal, it's cute, it does everything well, and there's not a single point in the game where I was annoyed, confused. I mean, that's really all I have to say. This game is amazing and beautiful, and please give it a shot if you can. Coming up on the end, or close to the end of my PlayStation journey, one of the games I had actually got a PlayStation 5 for was Final Fantasy XVI, which is weird because I am not a Final Fantasy guy in the slightest, but I have a friend who's been talking this game up for a very long time, and this game shares the same combat director with Devil May Cry, which is one of my favorite series of all time, and I think has the best combat in all of gaming, so I sort of felt an obligation to play this game, as he himself called it his personal masterpiece. I think it took a little bit of time to grab me, and it sort of has a lot of those issues as I was talking about with God of War 2018. As yes, the game is beautiful, but it really struggles to hold a consistent and smooth frame rate, despite not really looking all that much better from something like God of War 2018. The story at first, I think, can be a little hard to grab onto, but I think around 4 or 5 hours in, I was kind of hooked. Not super gripped, as I think that took a little bit longer, which I think is my main complaint with the game. But I had such a phenomenal time, as this is the only Final Fantasy game that I've ever completed. I think it took me around 40 hours, which I think I was definitely feeling fatigued at the end, as I am not a guy that likes to play super long games. But at that halfway point, I was definitely hooked on where this story was going, and I really liked all of the characters. I think Clive is very engaging. I don't think he's this super interesting, unique character, but I think you really get attached to him. Same thing with Jill. I know a lot of people have issues with Jill and how sometimes she seems like she's only really there to be a love interest. I still love their relationship and thought it was, just really cute. And I think helped give me motivation to see this story through. I think if Jill wasn't there, I don't know if I would have beaten the game, as it sort of feels like she's kind of the only family he really has up to that point. It's hard to talk about this game without giving it spoilers, but this has some of the best boss fights in all of gaming. And I really do mean that. Just the spectacle, the music, the gameplay. There are boss fights that aren't even 10 hours into this game that could have easily been the final boss fight. There were times when I was like, I don't know how the final boss fight is gonna do better than this, and somehow they did it like 3 separate times. Truly, I think this is the Final Fantasy game to play if you've never played the series before but want an opening. I think they tried to do it with 15, but kind of failed spectacularly. I know a lot of people like that game nowadays, but I've tried to play and I just cannot get into it. But this game, I think, has a lot of qualities that make it easy to get into, like the combat, and also the active lore system. There were a lot of times when I was confused and not really sure what was going on, and I could just press a button and open up this screen that would tell me everything I need to know. It was a feature that at first I was sure I was never going to use, and then about halfway through the game, I was using almost every cutscene. And while I think that is a testament to maybe the game doesn't explain everything as well as it could, I think it is still a very good feature that I hope a lot of other games adapt, as it would make a lot of other maybe confusing games easier to understand. I think my main takeaway from these games are: 1, the spectacle, as I think this game, like I said earlier, has some of the best boss fights in gaming, but also the music. This game has just so many just beautiful, sort of quiet, relaxing melodies that make just walking around the world so satisfying. I made a whole playlist that I actually uploaded on Twitter of just calming piano melodies from this game. And then even when talking about the boss fights, it's some of the most epic orchestra music that I've ever heard in a game. So while yes, there are definitely some caveats to this game, and I know a lot of core Final Fantasy fans have a lot of issues with it, I still would recommend this game to people as I think it's a great time and frequently goes on sale for like $25 to $30, and I think at that price, it's a great time and there's a ton of content. I still do have yet to play the DLC, but I've heard great things and I'm very excited to when I inevitably get around to it. No More Heroes is a franchise that I have known about for pretty much as long as I can remember. I remember it having a really big resurgence with 3 when that came out, especially for the Switch. I remember a lot of people like Nintendo YouTubers talking about it. But despite hearing so much about it, I actually didn't really know anything about it, and I knew it was always something that I should probably check out just because it looks like something that is up my alley. Hack and slash, really goofy, not serious at all, cel-shaded, cartoony sort of thing, which naturally drew my attention. So I decided to sit down and just play the first one. I know a lot of people like 2 and 3, but I don't intend to play the whole series, but I just wanted to get one out of the way so I was more familiar with this franchise. And I had a decent time. I think the game has not aged very well. This game was made for the Wii, I believe, which is why if you play the combat now on a normal controller, which is probably how you're going to play the game, it feels a little weird. The open world is very empty and could have easily just been a menu, and the game overall feels pretty low budget. The graphics are definitely charming, but not particularly great. The voice acting is sort of whatever, and the story is essentially non-existent. And it sounds like I hate this game, but no, I didn't. I thought it dragged on maybe a little too much, but I think a lot of that has to do with the open world. I don't know what the community feels about it, but I do know that the second game went for a more linear style, and even though I haven't played it, I can imagine that that is probably much better. The open world is just very empty, and I think this is probably due to the budget and hardware limitations of the Wii, so I understand it. But I think over time, especially a couple hours in, it just really felt annoying to have to drive all over the place, and especially in a car or bike vehicle thing that doesn't really feel too great to control. Despite everything I just said, I didn't hate it. I had a decent enough time, and this is still a pretty fun game to come back to. I would love to see a remaster that modernizes a bit, if not just a whole remake overall. But this is a game that will definitely stick with me in some way. I think it's very similar in style to something like Devil May Cry, even though it doesn't even come close to reaching that series. Travis Touchdown is a really charming character, despite him sort of being a little bit of a weirdo. I really like Robert Downs, who voices him, along with a bunch of other characters that I like, such as the medic from TF2. And despite the story being kind of whatever, I think it was pretty interesting just to see how it unraveled. The game feels very arcadey, and I think that's sort of what they were going for. It essentially is a game that is made up of smaller mini games in a way. You grind away getting money so that you have enough money to then fight the next big boss battle, and pretty much just do that over and over and over again. I think by the end of the game, I was definitely sort of hoping it would be over. It took me around 8 hours, though. I think I took my time a little bit with it, as I think you could probably beat this game in like half that if you know what you're doing. Overall, I don't really have too much to say. It's alright, not awful, not amazing, and I do at some point want to check out the later games, as I imagine a lot of what I'm talking about here have been fixed. I played a little bit of the beginning of No More Heroes 2, and the graphics look way better despite it still being on the Wii. And like I said, the more linear gameplay I think suits something like this way better. This was sort of a weird lull for me, as, you know, I had just gone through all these series and didn't really know what to do next. No More Heroes was sort of just an out of the blue thing, and this next one, Freedom Planet, is pretty much more of the same. I didn't want to play anything super long, and this is a indie game that I've had on my Switch for, I don't know, since like 2018. I remember it being one of those early Switch indie games that a lot of people in the Sonic community talked about, because it is essentially sort of a Sonic clone or Sonic inspired game. And sitting down and playing it, I think that's doing it a little bit of a disservice. You can very obviously tell that it is Sonic inspired just with how the main character controls and how they look and run, but I think it does try a lot of stuff different and does a lot of things in a very unique way. I didn't love it, but it's a really fun, charming 2D platformer. I think the pixel art is a little hit or miss for me. A lot of it doesn't really seem like it goes together, and the main character designs are kinda whatever. I thought the story was also pretty stupid, and I found myself just wanting to skip everything, even very early on. Though, that being said, the levels are pretty fun. I think I beat this in like 1 or 2 sittings and sort of breezed my way through, as I'm very familiar with these type of games. I'm glad I finally sort of just got it out of my backlog, as I have so many games like this where I'll buy them and then never really play them or never really give them a fair shot, and always sort of wonder in the back of my head what that game is actually like. And I like sitting down and truly getting a feel for these games, even if I didn't really have the best experience. That being said, though, this is a decent game. I'm sure it's a game that goes on sale all the time, so if you like 2D platformers, if you like Sonic, I think it's worth a shot, and it's something that you've probably already heard of. I know there's a second one, I think, but I haven't really heard much about it, and I don't intend to play it as of now. Maybe that'll change in the future, but whatever. Though, speaking of Sonic, Sonic X Shadow was coming out around this time, or Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, and I was very excited for this game. The last main Sonic game that came out was Sonic Frontiers, which I think I like more than most people. I think it is taking the series in a good direction and introduce a lot of things that, if just fixed and worked on a little bit, could move this series in a really good direction. And I was correct, because Shadow Generations essentially takes a lot of what was introduced in Frontiers and smooths it out and puts it together into this much more linear experience, something more akin to the Boost formula. And I think this is the best Sonic game. I really do think that. Or let me change that. Best 3D Sonic game. And I am specifically talking about the Shadow portion. Obviously, this is also a remaster of Sonic Generations, but everyone has heard a million times over and over again about Sonic Generations, and I have nothing new to add here. They didn't really add anything. I thought the Sonic Adventure skin was cool, and I played like half of it. It's still a good time, whatever, but my main focus, as well as I'm sure most people's, was the Shadow portion of it. Leading up to this, I was so confident that this would have been a good game, which I cannot say about most Sonic stuff. All the trailers looked really polished. They seemed to have been giving Shadow a real personality, which he has almost never had, and the animations that they've released up to its release, Shadow Dark Beginnings or whatever, are seriously phenomenal and have some of the best animation in the whole franchise. They always seem to do this with the lead up or build up to a new Sonic game. They did it with Frontiers and Knuckles, they did it with Sonic Origins even, and they're always these just beautiful, cute, amazing animations, yet for some reason whenever we get an actual Sonic show, it is like this low budget trash. I don't mean to disparage it, but even something like Prime, which I know a lot of people like, just lacks so much character and is like this weird fanboy and chum jum style animation. It really makes me wish we got a show like Dark Beginnings as a full budget show. But regardless, leading up to it, I was very excited, and I don't even know where to begin. I think this is genuinely the best 3D Sonic game. I really do think that. Usually with Sonic games, I always have to say, well, or but, when I'm talking about a Sonic game. Because as a Sonic fan, I'm able to put up with a lot of things. I'm able to look past the shortcomings of a Sonic game to really see what the developers were trying to do. That's kind of how Frontiers is. It is the definition of a 7 out of 10 game. I've recommended it to people, but I always have to say, well, you know, the geometry is kind of weird, or yeah, the boost stages kind of suck. But with this, I don't have that. Here I have a package that I can actually recommend to normal people who aren't familiar with Sonic, which I've kind of never had before aside from Generations. But even Generations, there isn't a story, which was its biggest shortcoming. But here we have that. All the levels are so fun. I think Kirk has cemented himself as the best Shadow voice actor by far. Even if you don't intend to play the game, please go watch the Dark Beginnings animation, because I think they are generally some of the best storytelling we have in the entire series. Shadow has some really great moments here. I think if I had one criticism that really bugged me is, I sort of wish we got Kellen Quinn back for this, just for one song, as I think that that style of music that we had in Frontiers for the boss fights would have really suited Shadow in this game, but that's such a minor complaint and wasn't even something that they were probably going to do. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of astounded by this game. It almost doesn't feel real as a Sonic fan. You know, we've been starved for so long that when we just get a straight up good, or even in my opinion great game, it almost feels surreal. Like I'm almost looking for things to complain about, and sure, there are some things that if I was really nitpicking could find, I could say those here, but I think that's almost wasting my time, as this game is just amazing. If you've ever wanted to get into Sonic and just really haven't been able to put up with a lot of the shit we've been dealing with for a long time, I mean, what are you doing? Play this game. It's already gone on sale multiple times since it came out, and it is truly phenomenal. I have never felt this hopeful for the Sonic franchise, and it seems like they've really found their footing. Hopefully that doesn't age poorly, as I felt that before, but I think this time I'm really confident with where they're taking it. The boss fights are also just so good. I don't really want to spoil it, even though, I mean, whatever, but they are a really nice spectacle, and if you are invested in this series, they are very satisfying to, in some cases, take what was awful in the game that they're taking it from and making it good. I'm talking about Sonic 06 here, but again, I don't really want to spoil it, as I think it's a really cool part of the game. A lot of the remixes, such as the BioLizard boss battle song, all sound so good. I think the last big takeaway I have from this is that it sort of proved to me that modern Sonic can have good 2D stages. I've always hated Sonic Colors and even Sonic Generations 2D sections where the camera will be behind you and then it'll pan to the side and you'll be playing a 2D Sonic. I've always really hated that because he feels so stiff and he's so obviously not meant for 2D. But here, Shadow feels great, and it sort of proved to me that it isn't the game itself, it's just how Sonic controls like a tank and isn't meant to be in that situation. But I think because of time constraints and because it is so hard to make long and thought out boost levels, that they sort of had to pad him out with these crappy 2D stages. But I think in Shadow Generations, the 2D stages almost rival the 3D ones. That's just how good they are. I think truly this game is amazing. I recommend this to people, even people who aren't Sonic fans, and that is something that I have essentially never been able to do aside from like Sonic Mania and the original trilogy. Please play this game. If there's any game I can convince you to play out of this whole 3-hour long video, or however long this is going to be, please check this one out. It would genuinely mean the world to me. After this point, I was obviously in a little bit of a Sonic high, and I decided, well, I may as well sit down and play Sonic Advance, as I had played Sonic Advance 2, and I realized that I had actually never beaten the original. And I also wanted to play the whole trilogy to really get a grasp on why a lot of people like this series and why a lot of people don't. I think it's really hard to talk about these games and give unique perspectives on all of them, especially in such a short format, because they're all kind of doing their own thing. I think the hub worlds are where a lot of the games differentiate themselves. We'll get to it later with Sonic Advance 3, but I again love the sprites, I love the level themes, but I think that Dimps' level design that we can see in all of their games with Sonic 4 and Sonic Rush just really isn't for me. It is these instant death, bottomless pits that will just ruin your momentum and are pretty much unreactable. I know a lot of people call the original trilogy unreactable with like random spikes and random springs, but I actually don't agree. I think you can completely play the original Sonic games and react to everything. But in this game, you will, in some points, fly off a ramp and just fall into a pit because you don't know where you're going, you can't see anything, especially with the Game Boy Advance's such small screen. These games would greatly benefit from an HD widescreen port. I generally think these games would go up like 2 to 3 points for me if I was grading it on a number scale if they got modern widescreen ports. But sort of like with Sonic Advance 2, it's very charming. Gameplay wise, it's sort of okay. And I really wish I could ask some questions on why they designed things in certain ways. Like I just cannot fathom what they were thinking with all the bottomless pits and vertical level design. It's not bad by any means, and I know a lot of people love these games, especially if you've been playing them over and over again and you're really good at them. I can definitely see them being very satisfying. But to me, and you know, me being so used to the original trilogy and how those games are designed, it was a little weird for me. Sort of similar to Freedom Planet, I still wasn't really feeling like I wanted to jump into a game and really take in a full experience, which is why I decided to sit down and play another indie game, which I've been wanting to play for a long time, and that is Sprawl. A lot of what I said about Boltgun actually applies here, as it is another boomer shooter style game, though this one isn't directly trying to be a boomer shooter, I don't think, but the movement and the weapons and the overall aesthetic of the game are very well done. It sort of goes for this cyberpunk dystopian future vibe, and I think it does it really well. It has this almost pixelated yet still 3D low poly vibe that I really fuck with. I think this game would probably get better if you do multiple playthroughs, and I can definitely see myself coming back to this in the future, as this almost gives me like speedrun vibes. It has a lot of really interesting movement that, again, like I said, probably makes replaying the levels feel very satisfying, and almost reminds me of Ghost Runner, but on a much smaller scale. There isn't really a deep story here, at least not one that I picked up on. I know there is, overarching themes and there is a story, but not really one that's super important. You can sit down this game, put on some music, put on a video in the background, and just vibe out and have a good time. And that's honestly what I love about it, and what I love about boomer shooters in general. I remember really liking the shotgun, and there is actually a surprising amount of variety when it comes to the enemies and how you're supposed to approach them. A group of enemies is almost treated like a boss fight instead of just cannon fodder that you easily mow down in other boomer shooters. And I keep calling this a boomer shooter, but the more I say that, the more I realize that I actually don't think it is a boomer shooter, though it definitely has a lot of the same themes. Overall, it's another indie game that I definitely recommend and goes on sale all the time. It has a really cool vibe, and I'm definitely interested to see what this developer does next, because I think they are probably going to do something great. I really have not been feeling Call of Duty for kind of a long time. And I'm saying this as someone who loves Call of Duty. Like, I genuinely do. I use gameplay of it on this channel. I grew up with it. I made friends on it. And Modern Warfare 3, the new one or whatever, was the first one that I just straight up didn't buy. And that was sort of an eye-opening point for me, because I have always bought Call of Duty even when they are dog shit. But that was the first time where I was like, not this time. And Black Ops 6, if it weren't for it being on Game Pass, would have been the same thing, as I don't think they're bad games, but I think I'm sort of just growing out of it a little bit, which sucks, because even Modern Warfare 2, I kind of had a lot of fun with it. I sort of felt like, holy shit, they're taking this franchise in a new and good direction, especially since Modern Warfare 2019, where it sort of felt like they didn't really know what they were doing. I think Cold War was also pretty good, but the games have just really struggled to grab me. I'm not a fan of the battle passes and how they update the game over time. I think a lot of these games are in their best when they come out. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but that's at least just what it feels like to me, because whenever I revisit these games a couple months in, I'm just not feeling it anymore, and it feels like I missed out on so much stuff. It makes me wish we sort of got just standard DLC packs and a couple weapons, instead of this long battle pass with a million new weapons and random cosmetics that make the game just look weird, and maps that aren't really great. Like, seriously, what is happening with the maps in these games? I know it's like a meme, but seriously, it just feels like they don't know how to make maps anymore. There's like one or two good ones in the entire game, and it feels like these games launch with like 6 maps to begin with. It's just so confusing to me, because it really, I don't think, at least in my head, is that hard to make a good or at least tolerable Call of Duty map. I think they oftentimes overcomplicate it. At least with the game we're talking about now is Black Ops 6, it sort of feels like that too. I sort of just wish we had generic 3-lane maps, which I think they have started to do, but still there are just so many times when there's just random corridors or vertical sections that just make it very unnecessary and make the whole map feel very visually noisy, if that makes sense. But I'm talking about the multiplayer. What I do want to talk about is the campaign. A lot of people were hyping up Black Ops 6's campaign as sort of a return to form, and I'm actually someone who really likes the original Call of Duty games when it comes to their campaigns. I really liked the Modern Warfare ones, and I really liked the Black Ops ones. So when I heard a lot of people hyping this up, I was very excited, and thankfully it was on Game Pass, because I would not have played this if it wasn't. And I think overall, it's fine. A lot of people hyped this up like it was this brand new thing for Call of Duty, but no, it's just a Call of Duty campaign, unfortunately. I thought the stealth sections were okay, but they're still very generic, and if you mess up once, it just becomes a normal run and gun Call of Duty level. I thought the time period and aesthetic was pretty cool. I think the 90s is a very interesting time period, especially in Call of Duty. And I also thought the weapon variety was pretty good. But I don't really think there's anything special. I think a lot of people were just excited to see something different, even if it wasn't that crazy. So a lot of people hyped this game up, I think, unnecessarily. I think they expect you to care about a lot of the characters more than you actually do, or will probably end up doing. And I just sort of got lost at the end, where there are these huge realizations and big character moments that I think would have been much more impactful if we were playing as a character that I cared about even slightly. Now, like I said, I've been out of the franchise for a while, so maybe people do care about these characters more than I think, but I don't know. It was okay. It's Call of Duty. Nothing really new here. And this next one I'm kind of just going to breeze through because, yeah, we're talking about Sonic Advanced again. I decided, well, I played 1 and 2, I gotta play 3. And this one I think was my least favorite, which I've heard a lot of people say before. I really hated like the hub area in between levels, and it got lost all the time. I also think at this point I was just very fatigued of Sonic Advanced and kind of knew what to expect. These games are all very similar, but again, I'm saying the exact same things. I like the sprites, I like the level themes, and I think overall it's very charming, just the level design is still not hitting for me. I kind of feel bad because I don't really have a whole lot to say about these games, but I think if they do a widescreen port and I sit down and really try to get these games to grow on me, I think in the future I could look at these games much differently. But as of right now, I don't know. I'm just not feeling them. But I do still have a lot of nostalgia for them, and I respect them as a franchise, and I really hope we get to see them re-released sometime. Similar to Final Fantasy XVI, I knew that when I got a PlayStation that I'd want to sit down and play Ghost of Tsushima, or Ghost of Tsushima. I don't know, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. But this game has always looked insanely beautiful to me, even on the PS4, where it was stunning, and with the director's cut on PlayStation 5, man, it looks stunning. And again, we're going with the theme of these PS4 games that are being bumped up to HD or 4K on PS5, looking way better than even a lot of PS5 exclusive games. I got a lot of use out of the camera mode in this game, as just walking around feels like this picturesque scene that was almost crafted specifically for you to just take in the environment. The story is very gripping. Like, I was really interested in what was going on, which I think is hurt by the fact that a lot of the character interactions and cutscenes are in-engine, and the facial animations in whatever engine they're using just don't really match the vibe sometimes. I think a lot of the characters have these very stiff and lifeless faces while giving an emotional speech, and it kind of took me out a lot of the time. I think this game would easily be a 9 out of 10 for me if it had some true pre-rendered beautiful cutscenes, but even then I still was really engaged. I thought the main character and his character arc was really interesting. I do wish that there was almost like a chaos system from Dishonored here, as it doesn't really feel like the way you approach the game actually changes. Sure, sometimes characters will say stuff or be mad at you, but the story will play out the same way pretty much every single time. I'm very excited for Ghost of Yotei because I think they could flesh this series out a lot better and give it more depth, as here, it sort of didn't really have a lot of depth, but I don't think that's a bad thing. When I was playing this game, I was almost thinking like, this is what Assassin's Creed should be. When I initially started playing, I was very scared that I was going to be traversing this very bloated open world with very menial side quests, and overall it would just make me feel very overwhelmed. But I was very surprised with actually kind of short this game was. I think I beat the main story in like 16 hours, and a lot of the side quests you don't even really have to do, but they're there if you want to, and I really like that. I wish that Assassin's Creed and a lot of Ubisoft games, and even just a lot of open world games in general in the AAA space, would take notes from this game, as you don't have to bloat the world with a million fetch quests and a million icons that just make you feel overwhelmed and fill up space. I definitely recommend this to anyone who has a PlayStation 4 or 5, and I know it's on PC now, and if you have like a widescreen, really nice monitor, this game looks phenomenal. I don't, but I've seen people post about it, and this is like one of the few games that I've seen where I've actually considered like, maybe a ultra-wide monitor would be cool, which is something I have never thought about before. I think my main takeaway is obviously the graphics and the vistas and the mountains, and it all just looking so insanely beautiful. The combat, while basic, also made me feel really cool in a way. Like, it's not super fast or flashy, but you truly do feel like this methodic, skilled samurai. And as the game progressed, I just felt like I was getting better and better at it and becoming more what Jin would actually be like in real life, if that makes any sense. Overall, I really like this game, and I have not been disappointed with the PlayStation exclusives that I have played so far. If you have a PlayStation, I think this is on PS Plus. Please go give it a shot. It is truly a one of a kind. And I'm very excited for Ghost of Yotei. Despite all the losers whining about there being like a woman main character, like who gives a fuck, I have full confidence that Sucker Punch is gonna knock it out of the water and expand this game into something that is going to be special. So last year I actually had played through Dishonored, and it was one of those games that I revered and really looked up to, especially from that Xbox 360 and PS3 generation of games, as I think if you play all those games, they haven't really aged the best, but there are some, like Dishonored and our next game, that have held up really well, and that's the Metro series. Metro 2033 Redux, to be exact. I've started this game up a million times, playing it back on the 360 and even playing it on PC recently, but the PC port I always had issues with and I never finished it back in the day, so I actually wanted to, at some point, whenever that would be, sit down and really experience and get into this series because I have so much nostalgia for it, but I didn't really remember a whole lot about it. So randomly I decided, well, I'm gonna play it. I'll play it on PS5 or the PS4 version on PS5 because for some reason my PC version always gets bugged and I didn't want to spend a couple hours just to run into a roadblock and not be able to progress. So I decided I would just play it on console so that I would, for the most part, be alright. Despite that, I did crash a couple times, but I didn't get glitched out or locked in a random spot. So for the most part, other than like 2 or 3 crashes, it went pretty smoothly. And I actually really liked the game. It wasn't phenomenal or something that I would recommend to anybody, but it has aged really well and has cemented itself as one of those greats, you know, from the 360, from the PS3. I think the atmosphere is kind of unmatched. I think it captures that post-apocalyptic sort of Soviet Russian vibe really well, and the voice acting, while definitely a little cringe at times, is still really good. I hear some people like to play it with the Russian voice acting and put subtitles on, but I was fine playing it with the English and I was still able to get thoroughly immersed. I was a little confused what was happening as I don't think a lot of the story is conveyed very well, but after watching a couple lore videos, I sort of got the gist of what was going on. But even if you don't really play into the whole supernatural, like weird alien nuclear ghost creature things, I think you can still have a really good time. It's almost like a horror game at some points, and each of the areas are very atmospheric and fun to just walk around and look around at. It's almost like a survival horror. You really do have to manage the ammo you're using and not get too cocky with just mowing down any enemy you see. I imagine on a harder difficulty, this game is probably really fun to play and maximize your playstyle. I also played this game because I really want to play the newest game, Metro Exodus. I've yet to play Last Light and eventually Exodus, but they look like phenomenal games, and even though I was kind of spoiled on the reveal in Metro Exodus, the spoiler almost got me to want to play the game as it was such an interesting story decision that I do want to go back and play that game. So this was a good investment for me. I got to relive a classic from my childhood, and I love when I go back to those games and they're actually good. There are so many times that I'll go back and play a game from the 360 or whatever, which was, you know, my childhood, and it just hasn't aged very well, but I can thankfully say that this is a good time. You could probably find it on sale on Steam for like $1 half the time, but like I said, I had some glitches, even crashing on console, so a little weird, but it's still a great time, and at the end of the day, you're probably spending only like $4 on it, if that. I know it kind of said or made it seem like I was done with PlayStation, but I'm not. I'm sorry. I lied a little bit. There are a couple games, God of War, Final Fantasy XVI, Ghost of Tsushima, and now Gravity Rush Remastered are all games I knew I was going to play the moment I decided I was going to get a PS5. Gravity Rush has always been such an intriguing series. It has a vibe that is so interesting to me. I think it has to do with the colors, the green and purplish red colors that just make up and fill these levels are really interesting to me and are not really like anything I've seen before. This is also kind of a cult classic, as I think Gravity Rush is a very well-known franchise. I don't think it is as well-known as something like the other PlayStation games we've talked about here. This, once again, is a game that a friend was really into, and I knew I wanted to play just because I respected their opinions. And this game, I know this is a weird comparison, but I kind of played it like Spider-Man. I think a lot of people play Spider-Man and just web sling all over the place for half the game, and that's kind of what I was doing when I was playing this game. Using the gravity feature and really getting good at the movement just felt so satisfying. Collecting all the little, I don't know what they're called in the game, like the purple shards or crystals, just felt so good, and it felt really nice to explore areas and find those little crystals in places where I didn't think there would be any there. I also think that the combat, while a little jank, is actually pretty fun. I think it would be probably a lot better if it was expanded upon, but I did have to remind myself that this is a portable game. Technically, it came out on the PS Vita, but the fact that I had to remind myself is also a compliment because this game is still amazing if you're looking at it as a full console experience. I imagine that in Gravity Rush 2, they probably flushed that a lot more, and I'm really excited to sit down and play that, but I'm glad that I finally was able to play the original, as I really love this game, and I know they're making like a movie or something. I don't know what that's about, but I think this game could actually work really well if they decide to make a third game, and I'm really excited to play the second one at least. And I really like Kat as a character. I think her personality is actually pretty good. I think there was definitely potential for her to be pretty generic, but I think she has like an actual attitude and personality that make you care about her, and that goes for a lot of the characters. I think the average NPC you run into will just be pretty generic, like whatever, but a lot of the main characters and other people that you meet, without spoiling it, are really interesting and really cool. And while yes, because it's a portable game, the cities and enemy designs and stuff are pretty simple looking, especially on a modern display, I think they are all still very cool looking. Despite the cities being pretty empty, they were still very fun to explore and all had very unique themes. The game's scope is very impressive when remembering that it's a mobile game. It's more so open zone than open world, but even then it's still pretty big, and at first I was a little scared that maybe I was biting off more than I can chew, but I had a really great time, and I hope this franchise isn't dead because I think it still has so much potential, and I'm very excited to play the second game. One thing I've noticed since starting this journey was I start to just crave random games. Especially if I just had, completed a super long 40-hour game. I wanted to play like an indie game or a specific game from my childhood. And randomly, I got the urge to play Lego games. I don't know what it is, but they're just so easily consumable. I can just throw them on, not pay attention, and have a good time. And I had actually intended to play Lego Indiana Jones, but I had a friend at the time who was talking to me about Batman, and I was like, well, I don't know anything about Batman, but I do remember as a kid playing Lego Batman, so why don't I sit down and play that? And I had a great time. I don't really know what I could say about these games. I mean, they're so just nothing, but I think they've all aged very well, at least these original games. I know a lot of people have some issues with like the voice acting and stuff in the newer games, but I think at least with Lego Batman, it's all really well done. You can tell that while there isn't some deep, interesting characters or story here, a lot of the characters are really funny, and there are moments that genuinely got a laugh out of me. I was almost treating these games like platformers, as I think that's sort of how a lot of it tends to be. They are just puzzle platformers, and I thought that was really cool, as if you remove the Lego aesthetic and replace it with something, I guess, more normal or whatever, these would just be platformers, and I think that was really cool. And once I started treating it like that, I started having a lot more fun. And like I said, these games are perfect when you're not looking for anything crazy. You just want to sit down, zone out, have a good time. I'd imagine these games would be great while playing high or something like that. But for me, I had a great time just stuffing my face with food, putting on a YouTube video, and zoning out to this game. And I think that is the perfect setting for these games. I do eventually want to play like 2 and 3 and Lego Marvel and Indiana Jones and all that stuff. But for now, I got my fix with Lego. And in a couple years, when I'm getting that craving again, I'm going to jump back in. So despite me actually really liking Super Monkey Ball as a character and as a franchise, I really haven't played it that much. I've played the original through emulation a whole bunch, and I've played like the Wii one as a kid and stuff like that, but I had never checked out the previous one that came out on Nintendo Switch and stuff like that. But I knew that Banana Rumble was a game I was kind of interested in, and they had just recently announced a Hatsune Miku skin, and that sort of got me to finally sit down and play it, as well as it being on sale. I was also on vacation at the time, and just having my Switch, this was like the perfect game for that, to just play like in bed or in the car and not really care about what was going on. And as someone who isn't a super hardcore Monkey Ball fan that can critique the physics to a T, this game felt really good. I think it was very easy at points, and I think that they probably should have made it a little harder, but overall I had a good time. I do sort of wish that the level themes were more interesting, and a lot of the music was sort of just whatever, but I really liked the characters. I thought the cutscenes were very cute, and I love the new aesthetic. I hope they keep this art style. I thought being able to play as Sonic or Kiryu or Hatsune Miku is really cool. Beat from Jet Set Radio. Overall, it's a pretty fun game. It is also a Sega game, so it goes on sale all the time. If you at all have wanted to get into Monkey Ball, I think this is a great stepping point, and as long as they sort of just keep doing this going forward, I think the Monkey Ball franchise is in good hands finally, since it hasn't really seemed like they've known what they're doing up until this point. Yakuza 0 solidified Yakuza for me. I knew after I beat Yakuza 0 that I was going to play the rest of the series at some point. Even though it was going to take me a really long time, I want to see how this world and story evolves. And Yakuza Kiwami coming to the Switch was the perfect in for me. Like I said with Monkey Ball, I was still on vacation, and surprisingly, while I was actually playing 0, I thought multiple times that this would be a great game to play in bed while doing a bunch of side stuff, or in the car while grinding battles and upgrading your combat. And when I heard that Yakuza Kiwami was coming to the Switch, I was really excited. So when it finally launched, I just happened to be on vacation and only had my Switch, and it was almost like the perfect moment for me. So I bought it, I installed it, and I had a really good time, and it actually runs really well on Switch. There are definitely a couple situations where the frame rate dropped a little crazy, and definitely during combat, but for the most part, it actually ran and looked really good. They brought over the combat from Yakuza 0, which I don't believe was in the original PS2 game, which this is a remake of, and I actually think I like it a little bit more in Kiwami, which might be a hot take, but I think that Yakuza 0's combat was a little bit too complicated, at least from the outside. Once you really start getting into it, I think it is very interesting and very deep. But Yakuza 0 simplified it just a little bit, at least when it came to the upgrade system, and I actually kind of liked that. Though I will say the implementation isn't as good when talking about boss battles. A lot of the boss battles in this game are really annoying. Using guns or tag teaming you, it just feels like you can't get an in, and like I was relying on healing items to even get through what seemed like pretty easy fights to me. There were a couple instances where I swapped on easy mode because I just didn't want to deal with it, and that was a little unfortunate for me. As I don't talk about them in this video because I didn't beat them until the beginning of this year, but I actually played Kiwami 2 and have started playing Yakuza Pirate, and I actually really like the more simplified combat in those games. Again, I don't know if that's a hot take, as I think Yakuza 0 is a lot of people's favorite games and they probably love the combat, but at least in Kiwami, it was sort of a love-hate relationship, as I love how they simplified it, but a lot of times when I was using it, I was just getting my ass whooped and getting really frustrated. I think enemies healing up mid-boss fight is really annoying. Yes, I know you can counter them, but in situations where I don't have enough heat, it sort of is just frustrating that I have to sit there and wail at them while they heal up all the health I had just spent the last 5 minutes trying to deplete. Story-wise, I actually really liked it, and I was really interested to see how they carried on from 0 because I surprisingly have not been spoiled up to this point, despite these games being like 20 years old. I think Kiryu is one of my favorite main characters in gaming, and it was solidified here. I think he is such a great uncle to Haruko and Date, and the weird side quest with his daughter, and the whole dynamic between Kiryu and Nishiki, which is so different from 0. Again, I had not been spoiled, and I had no idea when playing 0 that Nishiki would have been the antagonist of this game. And I think he is such a good antagonist too, as I actually don't think I would have cared about him as much if 0 didn't exist. I can't imagine people really caring when playing the original game and not having the initial setup that 0 gave, because I think 0 really made you care about Nishiki, and seeing him turn into this character over the course of Kiwami was so interesting. There are moments where you see him snap and it's like, oh, that's how he got here. The story almost plays out in reverse. In the beginning, you're not really sure how Nishiki had this big character change, and throughout the game you see these flashbacks where he's forced to become this really strict Yakuza. Majima was also great here. He is probably my favorite character aside from Kiryu, which is not a hot take. And it was a little jarring, as with Yakuza 0, he's almost played up to be just as important as Kiryu, but in this game he is definitely much more of a side character, but I still really liked him nonetheless, and he's such a nice change of pace when you're having this really serious story play out, and then the moment you start walking around, he will almost jump scare you and have this whole quirky side quest, like turning into like a zombie or hiding in these big traffic cones. It's just, I really do love him as a character. I really cannot be any more happy that I decided to play through this series, and I could not recommend it enough. They're not for everybody, there's a lot of reading, they're pretty long, but I think this game took me only like 20-25 hours, which really isn't that long. I think a lot of people talk these games up as like super long experiences, and while they definitely can be, I think if you pace yourself well, you can easily get through these games in like under 30 hours. I think around starting Yakuza 4 is when they really start to ramp up, but so far, the nice 15 to 20 hours is really great for me. I like that, and I like that these games are pretty much as long as you make them. You can have these games easily reach up to 100 hours if you are doing every side quest and perfecting every minigame, but the way I play them is I just pick and choose what I want to play, and I have a really great time doing that. And I am very thankful that they allow me to do that, as if I think they shoved a lot of this side stuff in your face or had a super long main story, I could definitely feel myself getting a little annoyed and fatigued. Which I guess we will see as the story progresses, and as these games get longer, my true Yakuza fan status will be tested, but I'm pretty confident I'm going to have a good time, and Yakuza Kiwami was a good time. This game is probably better if you play it on PC or on PS5, but I think the Switch version is actually really great and made playing it a lot more tolerable for me. So still, Switch version is great, and this game is amazing. I do not have a deep connection with Silent Hill, which is a little weird because I feel like everyone kind of does nowadays. I feel like it's almost become like a TikTok trend to love Silent Hill 2. And when the remake was coming out, I was actually really interested as this would sort of be an opening for me. Talked about early on in the video how I am not immune to jank and how a lot of these older games are hard for me to come back to, and trying to play at least Silent Hill 1 was definitely the epitome of that, as I am definitely just not built for those games and I don't really like survival horror overall. But pretty much exactly like Resident Evil 4, these remakes serve as a great entry point for people like me, and I think I loved Silent Hill 2 way more than normal people. I know a lot of hardcore fans were very critical about this game up to release and even after release, but I think generally people liked it, which I am very glad because I genuinely loved this game. It has some of the best sound design in gaming, period. Some of the best acting. I think James is just such an interesting character. I've, after the fact, really tried looking into this game and trying to understand its themes and messages, and it's almost never ending. It almost feels like you could never really grasp what this game is trying to tell you, but I think that's what makes it so amazing. I think the remake captures the atmosphere perfectly. I think it does a really good job at making you feel like this random 30-year-old dude who has no idea what's going on, especially with the haptic triggers on PS5. Even if you have perfect aim, you do sort of feel like a wimp, and I think that they handle that really well. I think Resident Evil 4 at points feels a little pointless as they're trying to scare you as you are roundhouse kicking one of the villagers. It doesn't really feel too scary, but this game I think captures it really well. And I don't mean to compare the two as they're not really comparable at all, but it's kind of the most similar game I've played to this, so it is immediately what comes to mind. And despite me not liking survival horror, I still really liked this game. I still had a lot of fun here. I think they give you just enough healing items and just enough ammo to where it's not too annoying. I played this game on normal difficulty, normal puzzles, normal combat, and didn't find it too hard. There were definitely some puzzles where I almost considered looking it up because I was just so confused, but in retrospect, I think I was just being a little stupid and they're not really that challenging. It's almost impossible to talk about this game without spoiling it, and I thankfully went into it without really knowing anything about it. I actually thought I had been spoiled, and while I was playing it, I was almost expecting certain things to happen, and then they didn't, which was really weird, but also made it a really interesting experience. If you can go into this game completely blind, if you have a PS5 or a decent enough PC, please play it. I do think this game has some issues when it comes to Unreal Engine 5, but again, I think that's more of an Unreal Engine 5 thing than a Silent Hill 2 thing. The game isn't super smooth, and there are definitely some weird ghosting issues and anti-aliasing issues, but Unreal Engine 5 is the bane of my existence right now. Thankfully, it doesn't ruin the game, and you get used to it over time, but I really wish that these games were more optimized, and hopefully in the future, Unreal Engine 5 has a lot of these kinks worked out. Similar to survival horror games, a genre that I just have not been a fan of is Metroidvania. I don't know what it is, but these open world sort of 2D platformers have never really been my thing, which is weird because I love 2D platformers. But whether it's Blasphemous or Castlevania or Metroid, I've just really struggled to get into them. I think it's just their gameplay loop and constantly going back and forth through the same areas is just not really for me. Despite the games like I just mentioned being really good games, they just really struggled to grab me. Though randomly, I was walking through Walmart and I saw Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown for like $12, and I thought, why not? As this is a game I've heard a lot of great things about and that my friend really likes, so I thought I may as well give it a try. And weirdly, I played this game almost in one sitting. I played like 14 hours of it in like 2 sittings, and actually had a really fun time. I think it definitely starts to drag as, for some reason, a lot of 2D platformers I just don't think warrant their playtime, and I think definitely get fatiguing after a while. And I think this game was definitely pushing it, but the fun movement and the interesting combat at least helped it in that regard. I think the ending, I was almost wishing it would be over, as without spoiling it, the main bad guy you technically kill like 3 separate times and he comes back every single time. It was like 4 in the morning, I had stuff to do the next day, and I was like, bro, please just let this be over. I'm really sad that Ubisoft seems to have thought that this game was a failure, as this was truly a really special game, and it sucks to see the studio pretty much get dissolved, and we probably won't see another game like this from them. I'm not a huge Prince of Persia fan, as I do want to get into the series at some point, so there's not really a whole lot I can say on that front, but I think there is something to be said here that this is like the first Metroidvania game or whatever that I actually completed, so interpret that however you want. I had a decent enough time, but I don't really know if I'd recommend it to everybody. So after beating Halo 3, I was actually pretty sure I wasn't going to play the rest of the games, as I almost didn't want to ruin that special experience. The Halo Trilogy is the best trilogy in all of gaming in my opinion, and Halo 4, while not awful, I definitely don't think took the series in a direction that I would have liked. But after coming out of it, I don't think it was that bad. I think the main takeaway that I just really didn't like was how Cortana and Master Chief's relationship evolved. It almost felt sexual, like they had a crush on each other. And while I don't think that is necessarily bad, as I can definitely see the aspect where Master Chief gets really attached to Cortana as sort of his only friend in a way, but there were definitely times where it just sort of felt a little uncomfortable hearing them talk to each other, almost like I was interrupting something. I actually really like the art style. I think my only issue was I think that the Forerunner technology is a little boring looking, and I think if they would have made it look a lot more interesting, I think people would have probably liked it a lot more. The weapons feel really nice. All the enemies are pretty interesting to fight against and have their own little quirks. I'm not really sure how I feel about sprinting, but I don't think it's the end of the world like a lot of people make it out to be. Like, I think it feels fine in Halo Infinite. I think it just completely depends on how they build the levels, and at certain points, yeah, I can definitely see like sprinting is a little weird when I'm blazing through a section that didn't really feel like it was designed for it. But overall, there's not really much I can say. I do still think it ruins a lot of the events of Halo 3, like why are we fighting elites again? I know it is kind of explained, but it almost ruins that evolution of their relationship and does take away from, I think, what made that original trilogy so great. I think overall, I'm glad that I came out of it feeling a little bit better, as I had actually tried to play it right after 3 and just straight up could not do it. But I'm glad I came back and gave another shot once my mind was a little bit more refreshed and I had a decent time, and honestly, that's all I could ask for at this point with Halo. It's not on this list because I never reached the credits, but I actually had tried playing on both the PS3 and PS3 Little Big Planet. I've always really liked Little Big Planet, even though I haven't really played it that much. It is just such a cute little series that has been abandoned. And I tried playing it on the PSP and the PS3, but I had other stuff going on. I had other games I wanted to complete, so I sort of just put it down. But because this is my PlayStation era, and I was mooching PlayStation Plus off of a friend, I saw that Sackboy, A Big Adventure, a game I'd actually heard pretty decent things about, was free to play. So I decided to install it and give it a shot. I played this game completely solo, and I think that that is absolutely the wrong way to play it. I played a little bit of it near the end with a friend, and it is way more fun, and you can definitely tell once you start playing it with people that is how it was meant to be played. When you're playing solo, the levels feel empty, the game is absurdly easy, but once you start adding more chaos into the picture and having other people there, and solving puzzles with your friends, trying to communicate, all that type of stuff, then I think that's really where it opens up. But even playing solo, it was a fun enough time. I sort of just played this game in the background as I was watching stuff, and I had a good time. The voice acting is really good. I think this is a great game to play with like your kid or something like that. Sackboy is super cute here. I almost don't like how they make him sound like a kid though. I kind of liked his weird little like gremlin noises in the original games, but he is still very cute. And Sackboy, despite being from a franchise that I don't have a super deep connection with, I think as a character is designed so well that he's so charming. Like I don't know what it is, I've just always loved how he looks, and I really hope at some point we get another Little Big Planet game, or at least he's utilized in some way, whether it's in like a party game Sony does or something like that. I just really don't want Sackboy to die, as I feel like we just don't really have anything like him. Like I said, I played this game for free on PS Plus, and if you have PS Plus, I think it's worth a shot. I do think it overstayed its welcome a little bit. I think it took me like 12 hours or something like that to beat, which, considering the game is but easy and there really isn't a whole lot of depth to the gameplay, I was definitely feeling fatigued. But overall, decent time. I don't think it holds up at all when compared to Little Big Planet, because I think that those games are just so great. But yeah, it's a good time. So pretty much all of these games I beat in like a week or two, as this was the last week of December, and I was sort of looking at, okay, what do I actually want to do? What can I squeeze in here? I don't like to play games if I don't actually want to, so I weirdly decided to play BZZT, or BZZT. It had some weird controversy, like I don't think it had Chinese or something, and a lot of Chinese players were like saying the guy was racist or something, but I didn't get that vibe, and because of the controversy, it got blasted all over my timeline on Twitter, and I decided, well, I was excited for this game when it got shown off in a Nintendo Direct like months ago, so why not give it a shot? You're supposed to play this game multiple times through multiple playthroughs, but I only did one, and with that one playthrough, I actually had a lot of fun. I really like the pixel art here, and I think that the characters are very charming. It's definitely very Mega Man inspired, and I really like that. I've played a bunch of them on this list, and it's pretty obvious at this point that I like indie 2D platformers, so this is right up my alley. And it was also super cheap, so there wasn't really any harm in it. I don't really have a whole lot to say as it is just a 2D platformer, but the main takeaway for me was the music was actually really good, and pixel art, while not anything crazy, I remember there being multiple points where I wanted to take a screenshot just because it looked so pretty. I think that the addition of bloom that the guy added to the game looks really nice, and I had a lot of fun, so no complaints here. Throughout this list, whether it's God of War or Metro, there have been a lot of 7th generation games. Games that I haven't played since I was a kid, but I remember very fondly. So, sort of following that trend, I decided to play Vanquished, which is such a weird and forgotten game. But I only really know it because it is constantly bundled with Bayonetta on modern storefronts. And I just happened to own it because it was cheaper if I bought the bundle than instead of just buying Bayonetta, which I had bought a couple months earlier. But because I already owned it and I knew it wasn't going to be too long, I decided, why not? Let's just rush through this game. And it is sort of weird this game isn't talked about. I assumed that if I Googled it or looked it up on YouTube that it would have like a lot of video essays and sort of be like this cult classic, but there really is nothing, which is very weird as I think this game has actually aged really well. The movement is very fun, the gameplay is over the top and goofy, similar to Bayonetta, which makes sense because it's made by a lot of the same people. And this is a game that I could definitely see blowing up in random circles online, but I was a little shocked when I saw that no one really remembers or talks about this game. That also isn't too surprising once I looked into it further, and there really isn't a whole lot to grab onto here. The game is only like 5 to 6 hours long, the story is non-existent, and since this game coming out, there has been nothing else released for it, so it's sort of like this weird little game that exists in a vacuum. It is the most 7th generation game ever. That was my immediate thought and what I tell people when I think about this game. It is trying so hard to appeal to the West, and I think it comes from that era where a lot of Japanese developers were trying really hard to appeal to America and like the Call of Duty Gears of War audience, and this game just reeks of that, which is a little cringe, but also very charming. I don't really have a whole lot to say as this game doesn't take itself too seriously and it's not very long. There really isn't a whole lot here, but it would be interesting to see how this formula would have evolved if this game would have gotten a sequel. I think I'm just glad that I finally got it out of the way and I can stop wondering what the hell is this random game sitting in my library. So I think at this point, there was like a week left until 2025, and I was sort of stuck. I didn't know how to end the year, and I didn't want to waste it on some small indie game or something I didn't really care about. So I really wanted to think, like, what would be a great game to end off the year? And weirdly, I landed on Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. A game that I think a lot of people don't really think about, but when comparing it to my list here, it's a PlayStation game, it's a platformer, and I think it holds a lot of the qualities of what I wish gaming was. This game is beautiful. Like, it somehow manages to be so smooth, but still retain that next-gen fidelity that I think we all wished would have come with the PS5. And I think the art style is why it's able to do that. Nowadays, I think a lot of games focus on the wrong things. This game, similar to the original game where it felt like I was watching a Disney movie, this game felt like I was playing a Disney movie. We're at the point now where graphics are able to look like a lot of those movies that we watched as kids. We also have better voice acting and better production value, which overall just made this game feel so complete. And I really wasn't missing out a whole bunch on, considering I'd played the original and at least had the groundwork for what this series was about. So I was happy to see that they don't really expect you to know a whole lot. Also, this game was free, similar to Sackboy, so I really wasn't losing anything playing this game. But after playing it, I actually do want to get a physical copy just because I actually had a really good time and I do see myself playing this again in the future. The worlds, while not big and not open world by any means, are so detailed and so thought out. They really took into account the aesthetic of this series and the art style and took advantage of the PS5 as much as they possibly could. I mentioned that this game holds a lot of the qualities of what I wish gaming was now. And what I mean by that is this game focuses on all the right things. It's fun to control, it's not bloated, and it uses the power of the PS5 in all the ways that matters most. It uses the SSD to have cool transitions and almost no loading screens. It has an art style that suits the game and allows it to run buttery smooth and I don't think hitched a single time. There's just so much I admire about this game, and it makes me sad that I think they sort of see this game as a disappointment as it only sold a couple million, but it has so much potential and just shows me that, like, man, we're sort of settling for all these realistic, Unreal Engine 5 games that are hard to distinguish from each other and all run really shitty when we could have a lot of really unique, smooth running games with amazing art styles that feel actually thought out and aren't just realistic game number 50. I really liked Rivet, and I thought their dynamic with Ratchet and Clank was really cute, honestly. I loved their character, and I hope that we see them in the next game, assuming there will be a next game. There were multiple times when I actually felt myself laughing, as this game is written really well. It was almost hard not to hear Johnny Test when listening to Ratchet talk because they sound so similar. And I loved the way that they expanded the weapons here. They all felt so nice to use, and I felt myself really getting use out of all of them. During boss fights, I ended up using like 5 different weapons because you can stun them, then spawn a robot that'll bomb them for you, and then you can electrify them, and then shoot them with like a big laser beam. Like, there's just so many ways you can come at these enemies that I think really make replaying the game really fun, and which is why I will probably at some point go back and replay this game. Even though it's not a title that is revered as much as I wish it was, I think I'm really glad that I ended this year on this game. And overall, I'm really glad that I decided to dedicate this year to expanding my palette. Now I am much more comfortable with RPGs or hard games or really long games, and finding out what I as a player really want to play. I feel so much more love for this medium and truly feel like I have more authority now when talking about different games. But this journey is long from over. This year was definitely a little crazy, and I neglected some of my personal responsibilities to complete a lot of these games. So 2025 isn't going to be as crazy, but I do expect to keep playing a lot of games. I have already beaten a bunch of games in 2025, and I will probably be making another one of these videos then. They won't nearly be as long as this one was, which is why it's taken so long for this video to come out. I think if you're someone who is really pessimistic about gaming and is sort of sick of playing the same thing over and over again, I really do urge you to sit down and play a lot of these games that, while yes, maybe a little old, have held up and are revered for a reason. Whether it's Halo, God of War, Yakuza, BioShock, or Sonic, or Hellblade, or Paper Mario, there really is so much out there. And I think saying, oh, modern gaming sucks nowadays, I think you're neglecting so much of what makes gaming great as a medium. Thank you if you watched through this whole video. I doubt anyone will, but if you did, thank you. Maybe leave a comment. And let me know if you actually have been swayed to play any of these games that I talked about. I hope at least something here will catch your eye and you can experience what makes gaming so great. As cringe as that sounds, I do genuinely love this medium, and this journey helped me realize that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have Twitter and stuff in the description, and yeah, see you guys.